Vsi veliki uspehi podjetij so plod velike strasti zaposlenih. Tudi najboljša strategija na svetu ali najlepši prostori ti ne pomagajo, če v njih ne sedijo najboljši ljudje.
Competo je headhunting agencija usmerjena v iskanje in izbor vodstvenega in strokovnega kadra. Številnim posameznikom smo že pomagali do uresničitve njihove kariere, podjetjem pa pokazali pot do najboljših kandidatov na trgu.
V Competu vse delamo s strastjo. Prepričani smo, da le tako lahko premikamo meje. Take ljudi iščemo tudi za svoje naročnike.
Ni nas strah biti drugačni od drugih. Pri nas so tudi najbolj nenavadne ideje vedno dobro sprejete.
Rešimo tudi na videz nerešljive izzive, pa čeprav zaradi njih nekaj noči prebedimo.
Strast sprošča kreativnost. Inovativne pristope iščemo na vsakem koraku.
Delamo to, v čemer uživamo, in to zadovoljstvo prenašamo naprej. Vsakogar pričakamo z nasmehom in toplo besedo.
Na sporočila in vprašanja svojih naročnikov skušamo odgovoriti še v istem trenutku. Competo, prosim.
Če si strasten, si upaš tudi več tvegati. Smo majhna ekipa, ki smo se v težkih gospodarskih časih odločili, da gremo na samostojno pot. In odlično nam gre.
Pravi človek na pravem mestu je najboljša naložba podjetja. Še preden se lotimo iskanja pravega človeka, opravimo poglobljeno analizo podjetja, predvsem analizo mikrookolja. Marsikdaj se namreč izkaže, da za uspešno delo v nekem podjetju niso dovolj le kompetence, ampak tudi ustrezna vključitev v ekipo. Da je začetek ob zaposlitvi za obe strani lažji, pa izvajamo tudi uvajalni coaching. Najpomembnejše v našem poslu je, da razumeš ljudi. Verjamemo v ljudi, ki delajo s strastjo in uživamo, da smo del njihovega potovanja do uspeha.
Dobro jutro in dobrodošli v Competo. Veseli smo, da ste se odzvali našemu povabilu. Toplo pozdravljeni vsi, ki z nami potujete že 6 let in vsi, ki ste se nam pridružili kasneje. Iskrena hvala vsem za vaše sodelovanje, zaupanje, še posebej hvala našim partnerjem in pokroviteljem. Ker bo današnji dogodek prav poseben, vas vabim, da kar pogumno stopite skupaj z nami v prihodnost dela.
Dobrodošli še enkrat v imenu celotne Competo ekipe. Danes ne bomo govorili o našem edinstvenem načinu dela, tudi ne bomo izbirali najboljših kandidatov, nikogar ne bomo psihološko testirali in zaenkrat tudi ne bomo nikomur pomagali oditi. Danes bomo stopili v prihodnost, kot zahvalo za preteklo zaupanje in kot obljubo za naše nadaljne sodelovanje. Prihodnost pa je prihodnost dela, ne služb, kot pravi naš današnji glavni govorec, gospod Perry Timms. Mr. Perry Timms is a facilitator, coach, mentor, an HR professional with over 20 years of experience in both public and private sector. He works around the world and he describes himself as a lifeaholic. Today he will share with us his ideas, his views on how to fuel relationships with creativity, entrepreneurship, how to create success, work and not just jobs, how to bring more humanity in the workplace, and how to do that with courage and accountability. And he will tell you many more things, but I guarantee you, you will remember him most by his energy, enthusiasm, and of course shoes.
Thank you.
Perry, please
Thank you.
take us to the
Thank
future.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So Laura found me on YouTube talking about the future of work on a stage in Bucharest in 2014. Because although I'm from the UK, I consider myself to be a citizen of the world and Europe. So anywhere there's a stage and anywhere there's people interested, I'm interested too. And so Laura asked me if I would join this event. And it was then I realized that previously to me, you had the pleasure of somebody called Aleksander who tickled your intellectual buds previously. So I said, as long as I'm the warm-up for Aleksander, I'm happy with that. So I will set the stage, hopefully, for Aleksander to do what he's done so far throughout previous events, and that's go and send you into a place of intellect and intrigue. So a little bit more about what we're all about. In the future. They are officially the 3 sexiest words in the language of business. The sexiest words because anything's possible. Hope and optimism live in the future. Challenge and opportunity are there. Magnus Lindqvist is a trend spotter from Sweden, a very irreverent individual whose job it is to spot trends. And he's there to help us understand what the future may be. And so if it wasn't a job before, the role of a futurologist is now becoming something that's real. So after today, what I'm hoping to do is send you away with your first lesson and your first step into being Slovenia's futurologists. Are you ready to be a futurologist? Yes would be a nice response. Good stuff. Okay, cool. So what happened there? It disappeared. There we are. So there's a little bit more about me. You'll notice straight away there's a cartoon of me. That was a lifelong ambition of mine to be a cartoon. So if you wonder why that's there, I don't even play the guitar. My philosophy on human resources and HR, which is my professional field, is that I think HR needs to be less middle of the road and more punk, hence the musical reference, and maybe explains my hairstyle as well. But all the logos that are on this slide are representative of organisations and entities and companies and things that I cooperate with and I work with and I collaborate with, because I'm one of those people who never ever wants a job in my life from this point on. But I love work with all my soul. So I never want a job, but I love work. And I'm going to explain to you a bit later on about why that is. So these are a number of guys, there's a number of organisations, a number of places where I connect and I collaborate and I join and I share that belief and that fuel around the world of work. But let's start with a few quotes, because as a keynote speaker, if I didn't have a couple of quotes, I'd be less than competent. So here's one from somebody called Gary Hamel. Anybody ever heard of Gary Hamel? Californian, teaches at a London business school. He's revered as the world's #1 business thinker, but I think he may have some work to do in Slovenia, because maybe not that many people are familiar with Gary, but what his philosophies are all about is looking at the way we operate in a work and a leadership sense. And just to give you a kind of shortcut on that whole quote, what Gary talks about is an ideological revolution in business, that up to this point in time, businesses have been run as controlled mechanisms. Now, I think we only have to look around the world to understand that controlled mechanisms don't really have the outcomes that we think they're going to be. I'm not mentioning politics at all, am I, today? But what Gary's talking about is that in a world where the industrial age is starting to move into something more creative and more knowledge-based, the value of control as the competitive advantage is going down. So we cannot control things as we have done in the past. There's more of a chance that we should tap into spirit and energy in a totally different way. So I'm starting from that point. Controlism as a concept is no longer going to serve us into the future. And then this is the Chief Creative Officer at Dentsu, a creative agency in Japan. And when I saw Yuya Furukawa talk about the concept of design, it hit me that design, as he quoted there, will save the world. This is the kind of principle I want us to take away from today, that the future won't just happen. The future is something we can and should design for ourselves and for those around us. So remember that concept, design will save the world. And then another quote, so I've just got my 3 obligatory quotes as a keynote speaker, from Buckminster Fuller. You never change things by fighting the existing reality, but create something new that then becomes the kind of prevailing model. So all the time what we're trying to do is what's best for work? How do we tackle these influx of millennials? What do we do with the growth of technology? How do we do it? Stop trying to change the old and create something new out of those opportunities. So again, have that thought in mind. So from quotes, let's have some stats, because again, as a keynote speaker, if I didn't have a graph, you'd think he's not credible. And so here we go with the way the US labour force has looked over the last 170 years. So if we see from the purple line, agriculture completely bottomed out, industry starting to kind of flatline, but services absolutely exponentially growing. So if we had any doubts at all about what we call work, both now and in the future, that trend is indicating to us that we're irreversibly no longer going to be farmers or even makers, but we are all in some form of service provision. Whether that's through knowledge, through care, through whatever it is, we're in a service-based, knowledge-based era. And then if we look at some further research, just to double the credibility with another graph, from the Federal Reserve Bank in the US, we're worried potentially that the future means we have no work to do, that ubiquitous technology, that robotics and automation will render us all completely unemployed, and we'll see a chaotic society ensue from the fact that between 9 and 5 on a Monday to Friday, we're no longer occupied and up to all sorts of mischief. Well, the bad news, if you think that we're heading into a completely leisurely existence, is that non-routine cognitive work, things which aren't predictable, things which can't be controlled, things which require deep thought, things which require unique problem solving, are on the increase. Things which are mechanized, things which are algorithmic, things which are virtually automatable are again flatlining. So again, the message here is that the future of work isn't that there isn't any work. The future of work is that it's different from it has been before. It's less static and linear and predictable. And I'm going to take you to the future and start to explain what some of this looks like. But let's bust a few myths that we are all going to be replaced by robots, because we're not. Although if you're in Japan, you can buy your own personal domestic robot for about $500 now, if you want one. And for some people, that's becoming their best friend. So the Wall Street Journal reported on some research from Oxford University in England, because education's still pretty good in England, forget the politics. We've got something like 47% of work around us now that could be automated, that could be mechanized, that could be robotically delivered. 47%. That's a pretty big figure still, but it means, if you're like me and an optimist, that 53% of work won't be. And I'm hoping you're sitting there thinking, can I describe my work really easily? Because if you can, you might be in the 47%. If you can't, you're happy days. So have a think about that one. But I want to take you forward to 2029. Who remembers the year 2000? We all do, right? That we thought our fridge and our microwave oven and everything would stop working, computer systems would crash, we'd go back to a bartering system. No, it didn't happen, did it? But we're nearer to 2029 than we are the year 2000. Yet the year 2000 doesn't seem that long ago, does it? So 2029 is a key point. Why have I mentioned 2029? Why is 13 years or 12 plus years that significant to us? There's an engineer who works for Google now called Ray Kurzweil. In Ray's work in technology, what he's predicted is that by 2029, the computational power that we have created through digital technology will exceed the world's ability if we connected all of us to some sort of matrix. So computer power by 2029 will completely exceed our own capability. It will be the point that potentially biology and technology will merge. That could be the point that you have a nano robot inside your body helping you to repair poorly functioning parts of your body. It could be the year that we see the first person start to live towards 200 years old. We could see some amazing things happen by 2029. Some of this is pretty frightening, some of this is pretty exciting. If we live that long, I wonder what the fashion will be in 2029. But anyway, so 2029, keep that point in mind, right? Keep that point in mind. Just to give you an example of how quickly things may change, the icon on the screen there is representing GPS. You know that marvelous thing that means you can get from one place to another with some very helpful robotic assistant saying, turn left here, turn right there. And then you end up in a car park somewhere not quite where you wanted to be. Well, if you had that system in 1981, it was about as big as a picnic basket. It had a battery life that lasted about 15 minutes, so it was only good for short journeys. and it cost you $115,000 to install in your ubiquitous SUV or Winnebago. So in the US, that's what it costs. Now, the GPS in your phone costs less than $1 to produce, is a microchip smaller than your fingernail, and is virtually heading towards zero cost. You buy a telephone with a GPS system in it, you don't even think about it. So there's something going on where this kind of technology that previously cost us several tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars is now virtually worth nothing. Now, we've never seen this phenomenon before where products are virtually able to be built and provided at zero cost. So this is the kind of thing we need to think about. So the stick there represents hockey stick, because we're talking about the growth and the accessibility of a technology because it's more powerful, because it's miniaturized, and because it's so cheap to produce. And that's called the law of accelerating returns. So we think up to now, change has been pretty regular, pretty present, fairly rapid. Between now and 2029, it's almost like you ain't seen nothing yet. This stuff doesn't just go 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps. This stuff goes 1 step, 2 step, 4 step, 8 step, 16 step, 32 step, 64 step, you get the picture. Things will happen quicker and around us more than we've seen before in the past. So the law of accelerating returns is what we can expect in the future. So if you think, if I just sit tight for a while, this future thing's just going to go away. Absolutely not, unless you choose to buy an island somewhere in the Caribbean. Anyway, so this is the kind of thing we're talking about, not the linear progression, but this thing called exponential. And it is about growth, but it's not just about growth in acquisition of wealth. This is about growth of accessibility. It's about growth of impact. It's about growth of difference and opportunity. It isn't just about wealth. But as we know with the current economic system, that this also equals wealth. If you were to look at the most profitable and the most known companies in the world, maybe 10, 15 years ago, largely they would have been in things like energy. Now, they're all in technology, because that's the new power source for the world. Technology, not just fossil fuels and energy. And so this is the kind of future that 2029 might look like. So these icons are representing something that is likely to be so ubiquitous, we take it for granted. So robotics, we're already seeing factories and manufacturing environments where there's perhaps 3 or 4 human beings servicing several robotic machinery. So I went to a bakery in the UK, famous because it will bake and deliver a loaf of bread to anywhere in the UK within 4 hours. And it is literally a robotic production of bread with several people quality control checking. That doesn't mean they eat bread all day. They just check the quality of the bread. So we're already starting to see that we will have robotic colleagues, that we will have automated functions around us that we are part of. And then we'll have things like these unmanned aerial vehicles. So, you know, the film that we saw of the Competo people walking in the field was a beautifully piloted drone camera taking those kind of shots. It's that kind of thing we're going to see more of. So we can create hotspots around the world with these drones flying around. So literally, we'll probably have our own personal drone that's flying above us, giving us instant connectivity wherever we might be. There's a huge amount of opportunities with that kind of technology as it becomes miniaturized and virtually cost-free. Artificial intelligence is the big one. So it would be wrong for me to talk about the future without addressing deep learning and machine learning and computational power. The good news is that people like Professor Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk and Bill Gates have said we won't follow the pattern predicted by the Terminator movies. They are going to protect us from the rise of the machines. However, data analytics and things like autonomous vehicles, again, sound like something from a science fiction movie. Everywhere you go, data is being collected, data is being analysed, and data is being used about us. If you walk into Google's head office, before they even start to talk about the reason you're there, they'll give you something like 14,000 facts about you that Google knows, because it knows. Because everywhere we go, we leave a footprint. Everywhere we are, we're creating a connection and a link. Many people are scared by this. Many people feel infiltrated by this. However, it's built to give us a chance to make sense of the opportunities that we have. And I've already talked about the nanotechnology and the singularity that 2029 is. If you're in HR in 2029, you may have to make a choice between an augmented human candidate and a non-augmented human candidate who may or may not have additional computational power in their brain through some form of synthetic technology that will help them compute quicker. We may have that dilemma to face in 2029. And then we have a huge upsurge in something that's creating us a more enjoyable and useful experience. User experience is the reason we can download an app onto our phone and not have to worry about the user manual. There are people around now who say, what is a user manual? They've never had the need for a user manual, yet most user manuals were very useful for keeping your office door propped open. And we find that things like the technology that we see around us changes so rapidly. We need an intuitive interface. We need a simple system. So the big thing that's come into user experience and user interface is either any surface will be your access point, so you may not even need a telephone, or you'll simply talk to a clipped pin on your lapel and say something like, Alexa, what time is the next train home for me? And it will tell you. So the voice-activated aspect is already with us and is probably going to be even more proliferated in the future. But the way we interface with technology is a big, big aspect of how successful it becomes and how useful we make it. 3D printing, we've barely seen the beginnings of something where we no longer have to go and order something to buy it. We can print it ourselves in our garage, in our office, wherever it may be. So the fact that we need simply a blueprint to download to a device in our home to print something instead of buying something means making capability becomes ours, not just commercial. So 3D printing, again, has a huge impact on what we do in terms of consumption and what we do in terms of looking after the way we want to live. And part of the way we want to live is that some people may choose to no longer affiliate to one employer only, but become what's called a gig worker, a freelancer, a person who acts on demand for work to be done based on a speciality or a convenience of their own. So I think we're starting to see the challenge to the ubiquitous 5-day, 9-to-5 working week or sort of regulated pattern due to the irregular flow of work. And then the blockchain just blows my mind. So this is a technology-based ledger that provides trusted transactions between two parties, including financial exchange, without the need to regulate through legal or banking terms. This could completely disrupt the way we interact with each other in exchange of labour and services and goods, and provides us with a completely secure technological environment to create a whole new financial system. I'll leave that one there, shall I? So what does this look like? So this is something called the Strati. It's made by a company called Local Motors in the US. Is a totally 3D printed electronic vehicle. It's not autonomous at the moment, you actually drive it, but it's an electric vehicle that's assembled from 49 moving parts, printed within 7 days, and available from order now to next Tuesday. Now, if you looked at the average Mercedes-Benz, probably a lead time of 3 months from order to production and delivery, something like 25,000 moving parts. So this thing has 49 moving parts, is electric, and you get it within 7 days. Now, if you see this as an example, why would we ever own a car again, except for pure vanity? If we had these all over our transport system, we could jump in one, drive where we go, leave it. When we come back, pick another one up, drive it home, leave it on the drive, whatever. This could completely change the way we deal with urban transportation. And so this is an example where 3D technology and all sorts of other things combine to give us another option. And solar power was always something that was predicted to be a huge game changer. We're now starting to see a situation where this type of technology could be delivered to us for no cost. So we don't even have to pay for our own consumption of energy created by natural harvesting of the sun's waves. Tidal lagoon pools and all sorts of other hydroelectricity are also being brought in to help us create a situation where we no longer have to pay for the energy that we use. Gives us a whole different slant on the green economy. And then you may have heard of Hyperloop, where if you were in Dubai and you wanted to get to Abu Dhabi, it would take you about 2 hours on the fastest train. On Hyperloop, using magnetics and traveling at about 1,000 kilometers an hour, you can get there in 12 minutes in your own pod. For 12 minutes, you'd probably just sit on a box, really, wouldn't you? 12 minutes is no time at all. This kind of technology infrastructure is aimed at utilizing things like gas pipelines, which will no longer need to pump gas because we'll all be using green energy. So this is a way of using existing infrastructure with a completely revolutionary technology to transport us at the speed that we are capable of. So all these things are coming which will completely give us a different option about how we travel, how we consume energy, where we end up being. And then we've got this thing. 90% of the world's information was created in the last 2 years. This is already a 3-year-old statistic, so it's probably 95% now. Now let's not get this wrong. Some of that is Gangnam-style videos, cat pictures, all the stuff that pollutes our internet. However, we have to take into account that the billions and billions of terabytes of data that are around us, we've only just started to create. That gives us a huge challenge, though, in terms of not just the fact that it's there, it's great, we can use it. How do we use it when there's so much? So it's not information overload we're worried about, it's a filtering issue. This is where we need artificial intelligence. This is where we need machine learning to understand what we need, navigate that absolute mine of information and give us the right data and the right information. That's why we need that kind of autonomy. So this is all enraptured by the World Economic Forum calling it the 4th Industrial Revolution. So we are living in a time that in 50 years' time, when people are virtually teaching each other, they will talk about this was the start of the 4th Industrial Revolution, where Klaus Schwab says it's characterized by a fusion of technologies that's blurring the lines between physical, digital, and biological spheres. So maybe we're just at the starting point of something huge with massive potential. Now that gives us both a massive opportunity, but also an incredibly difficult challenge to unpick the old and create the new. And it's encapsulated by this theory of the exponential organization. So if you want to know a good book to help you get your head into this kind of game, Salim Ismail is a colleague of Ray Kurzweil's, who I mentioned earlier, at a thing called Singularity University. These are people, academics, business people, researchers, scientists, who are trying desperately to help us understand what this future looks like, how we make the best of it. So Exponential Orgs is a really good read for any of this, and I'll give you one or two examples as I go through. Here's a little logo test. You've seen these logos before, you recognize most of them, either on your phones or on the web. Pretty ubiquitous, yeah? Slack's an interesting one because Bilash was up here on Slack earlier just putting a message through. So Slack started out as a simple email-killing messenger board that now takes in over £100 million per month through subscriptions. Tiny startup in the US, now completely changing the way people in the workplace interact with each other. So if you're on email, you might have a think about Slack. But anyway, so here's a few logos. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to find out a little bit more about them and why they're so successful through this lens. All of those companies don't just have a business plan, they don't just have a strategy, they don't just have good leadership. They are fueled by a massive, transformative purpose. Yes, they make a lot of money, but they're fueled by a bigger sense of something. They're fueled by creating the future. They're fueled by changing the future. So here's a test. I'm going to open this up to the room now and give you some massive transformative purposes from companies. If you can guess them from the purpose, then maybe that purpose is the right one. So whose massive transformative purposes belong anywhere? Anybody? Airbnb. Belong anywhere. Wherever you go, you belong. Home is where you find it. Organize the world's information. Google, yeah, Google. So Google is now a ubiquitous term for search, but Google exists in that sense. Organize the world's information and also make a lot of money while they're doing it. All the music you'll ever need. Spotify. Yeah, Spotify. Small startup in Stockholm, has only been around for a few years. Let's not forget that. And yet we just take it for granted that whenever we want music, we can just stick Spotify on. That's got millions and millions and millions of tracks that would have taken us years and lots of our savings to have bought on iTunes. To be the Earth's most customer-centric company, who's that? Amazon. Yeah. So that's not, just to sell books. Do you remember? That's what they did in the days of dial-up internet. Yeah. That was what they did. They sold books. But now, something like 50+% of Amazon's sales are through its marketplace. It has created a place where businesses can come and use the massive selling power of Amazon, the massive algorithmic qualities of Amazon. And who would have thought that a company that sold books online is now the biggest provider of web services in the world? Everybody I know who has a new industry that wants to use web services goes to Amazon Web Services and connects into those. Anyway, evolve the way the world moves. Uber. So whatever you think about Uber's working conditions or its mantra or its philosophy or whatever it is, what Uber was setting out to do was change the way we look at transport, particularly urban, to help bring creative projects to life. Kickstarter, absolutely, yeah. Kickstarter exists as a platform and channels billions of what was usually called research and development into projects that come to life. Many of the projects we see around us would not have got off the ground without crowdfunding. Now that's really interesting because we're starting to see some bucking of the trend that you need a big investor or you need to have benevolent shareholders. You can just get the crowd to love a product enough that they'll pay you before it's even built. Elon Musk's latest version of the Tesla hasn't even been produced yet and raised something like 15 billion euros last year. Right, and then to accelerate the advent of sustainable transport, I kind of gave you a big clue there. Tesla, yeah. Now, Elon Musk's philosophy on this is not that I'm going to create this huge giga enterprise. Actually, Elon Musk's Tesla patents are all available online for anybody to download and use as much as they want to, because what Elon wants to do is stop the fossil fuel industry from flourishing and create an alternative. So therefore, he doesn't want to hold all the cards. He wants other people to use his greener technology. Anyway, so I wonder if now I can have a quick sip of a drink and rest my voice for 5 minutes or so. On your tables, just have this little discussion about what your company purpose is. So think about those massive transformative purposes we heard. And then immediately see if you can create your own version of not just the purpose you have, but this massive transformative purpose. So if I give you 5 minutes on the table, is that okay? Have a chat? Off you go. Thank you. Okay, so I will disrupt your table consultations. Sorry about that, but just conscious of the fact that I'm supposed to be here helping you and not just allowing all sorts of spontaneous things. Now, I don't know if you found that exercise difficult. Most companies that I end up working with, most companies that I have good relationships with, most of the companies I go to find it very easy to talk about their business, and they talk about their model, maybe their strategy, and the kind of purpose that you see pretty much everywhere, which is to be a provider of the best services to people that's really excellent and great, makes money for shareholders, da-da-da-da-da. It's all just a bit bleh. Now, when I say to them, what about your massive transformative purpose, the thing that gets your people out of bed in the morning to go, whoa, I'm part of something pretty special, even if it looks like all I'm doing is, saving some files into a secure area or manning a reception or whatever it is. So I like to think that the massive transformative purpose stops people saying they're just something, just the receptionist, just the driver, just the CEO. No, they never say that, do they? So I think the massive transformative purpose is a really powerful test for you in your company. So I guess if nothing else, my first sort of urge to you away from this is if you want to start to create your own future, don't settle for a blah, blah, blah purpose type statement. Don't settle for values that could be anybody's values. Have a look at what's massive and transformative about the work you do and start a little revolution in shifting your language and your understanding of why your company exists, and then start working out from that one and creating your own values. So it sounds a little bit like it's just a little extra word insertion to the purpose motive, but it's much bigger than that. Now notice it's called massive transformative and not just growth, because again, growth is often a byproduct, and a useful byproduct, of having a massive transformative purpose. Often if you chase growth alone, you'll find yourselves in a non-sustainable position, because all you're including in that sort of methodology is growth. This is about changing people's lives. This is about changing the world. This is about creating a legacy everybody can be proud of. And if there's one thing we need in this kind of challenging time, it's people to understand legacy and think about what they're leaving behind. So anyway, that's that particular exercise. So I did a little bit of non-scientific research because I'm not a scientist, but I know some scientists, so I did have some conversations. But I was at a conference in Brighton in the UK a couple of weeks ago called Meaning. So I've deliberately put the web link there, meaningconference.co.uk, because Meaning is a conference that exists for better business. And as a result of it, every year since 2012, they have managed to attract the most challenging, but also the most wholesome and the most hope-giving organisations to tell their stories. So by all means, have a look at that web reference and the associated videos and talks that happened afterwards. But I was there as a participant. I was also there to blog. So I was blogging some of the conference sessions. And those words came out from most of those blogs and most of those talks. So I looked at what people find about meaning at work. So I am going to get a little bit tree-huggy, soft and fluffy now. But I'm in HR, so I'm allowed to be. Right, so convenience and connectedness, we all pretty much like things to be convenient. Inherently we're a little bit lazy. But we do like to be connected. So, not just when your signal goes or your battery dies. I'm talking about just connected to people. Purpose and meaning, we talked a little bit about that. Inspiration and hope. And if we're to look at certain parts of the world, there's a whole lot of hope needed, mentioning no names. Adaptability and collaboration. This is not just about change. This is about how we navigate the world with each other. Learning and discovery, invention and creation, and making and fulfillment. There's something about our psychological makeup that we don't just like to do or exist, we like to make. It's fulfilling. Now that maybe make a difference. That maybe give somebody some help to have a better day. Okay, so it's not just the production of stuff. And then I have this theory anyway, that the future of work can be mapped. Now, I say mapped, but it's more about creating compass points rather than a map itself, because I don't think anybody could predict what the future is going to be in its entirety, but we can have a go at some frames of reference. And so these 7 dimensions are the things that over the last 6 or 7 years that I've been more obsessed about the future than I ever was before. I've started to see as the turning points, the pivots, the changes that are coming to the world of work. So I thought I'd talk you through each of them, but they've got these convenient things that they all begin with the letter D. So it's memorable, like digitization, decline of the job, and disruption as usual. So, if anybody does dare stop me at a cocktail party and say, so what's this 7 Ds about? Then I can just reel them off because they're more memorable by that mnemonic. But that's just a bit of clever wordplay on some trends and some activities which I see genuinely shaping what we call work right around us right now. So I'm going to talk you through them. And also, in tribute to the upcoming Star Wars Rogue One movie, that's out pretty soon, guys, every slide has a stormtrooper. And I also have an ongoing dare with other people I know who keynote that I will have a stormtrooper in every single slide deck I ever deliver in the history from now till end. Right, so the first one is digitization and socialization, and I deliberately have those 2 elements because what I genuinely don't believe in is that it will just be digital, because what we're starting to see with technology and the way it's constructed now, the socializing element of it is what makes it grow and thrive. So YouTube did not become a $1 billion success that was bought out by Google many years ago just because it was good at videos. it was great for creating socialized connectivity and sharing amongst people. So that's why I think this kind of technology is how it is. And the helpful acronym on this is the word SMAC, Social Mobile Apps Cloud. Now, it's interesting to see, as I said earlier on, those powerhouses of industry now have all got some element of this within them. And who would have thought how sexy Microsoft would have become? But their latest hardware adventures, their latest versions into different types of technology are changing what we even thought about Microsoft. They're kind of out-appling Apple at the moment. Because what they've got is a concept that their technology will enable them to do all these kinds of things. But we only have to look at the kind of current trend to use social technology and the fact that Facebook now have a product called Workplace to know that the writing is on the wall finally for the demise of email. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but email is like, well, certainly when I was in a corporate environment, was the scourge of my day. It was like, oh, look, here's another email, here's another one, here's another one. I'm just going through, oh my goodness me, there's about 80 of them. And you would dread coming back from a holiday, if you dare leave your inbox alone, to then open up to see, several hundred spam messages from colleagues telling you that there were cakes in the fridge from last Friday, and also there's an urgent report you need to read by tomorrow. I mean, come on, who would design the flow of work in that cluttered inbox? It's literally like they would give you a sack of mail and say, fill your boots, literally. So I really think we've got something wrong in the way we've wired business through email. So what I see a lot of the digitization and socialization happening in the future is that it will be much more intuitive. It will be much more tuned to us. It will be much more like we pull the information we need, not we just get thrown anything that anybody dare send. So I think the link to hyper stress, the link to the leakage of the working time from a shut-off point in the day of, say, 6 p.m. to any particular time, there's the little flash on that mobile device, isn't particularly healthy for us. So a great Chinese philosopher has looked at the 3 key sort of factors behind human suffering. In the past, we had pneumonia. Then in the 20th century, we had cancer. And in the 21st century, it's going to be insanity. It's going to be mental illness. And we are doing it to ourselves with badly designed, poorly executed technology driving a lot of a huge amount of stressful activity that we could do without. So I see this as a saviour. It's technology that works with our human rhythm, not an electronic version of a piece of paper. So that I see as a huge shift in how we access our work. It becomes more exciting when you get a little post on Slack than if you get another email. So there's something in the way we're designing technology to make it more social, to make it more human, that I think will see us take a great leap into something more purposeful and productive in the future. Which leads me on to this next point, which is possibly one of my most controversial points, but is meant with good intent to provoke a discussion about why the hell have we constructed this thing called a job? Why do we build a tick list of activities that somebody should do possibly every day? I don't know about you, but the last time I looked at a job description, it didn't reflect at all what I do every day. Maybe 20% of it did. And then we design a series of competencies, and then we go out to the market and try and recruit people to this generic, bland tick list of activities and think that's how we find the next superstar. Just don't buy that now at all. I think there's a much more sophisticated way to say who has the right skills to do the work we need, not fill a job. We're not industrialized as much as we were anymore. And even where we have industrialized working, it isn't just about an extension of the machine. This is a human being with a heart and soul, with fluctuating energy levels, fluctuating concentration levels, bursting with creativity that we suppress, and we say, that's not in your job description. It seems like job descriptions have been the most suppressing element of people flourishing at work. So what I'm seeing is that people are saying, I'm not going to have job descriptions. I'm not going to have job titles anymore. I'm looking for people who can do meaningful work professionally to standards still. You can have all that, but you don't need a 40-hour, 5-day-a-week construction around that. And the good news is It's not just me that thinks that's an outdated technology. Lots and lots and lots of companies are now saying this is how we want to work, and they completely throw away the concept of the jobs as we know them. So there's a technology company who creates social media sharing platforms called Buffer. Buffer has no office anywhere in the world apart from a bit of rented space in San Francisco where they come together about 4 times a year. They work in London, they work in Dubai, they work in Sydney, they work wherever they work. And there's one of the guys who was a quite senior person in that company who just said, look, we know people work at different times, we know people have different rhythms. All we ask them to do is say, when do we need to be together? And they create that kind of regularity of habit. The rest of it is based on the impact of the work they do. And that's all they want to know about. And then there's a company called Automatic, again, a technology company who make WordPress. So the power behind lots and lots of websites. And there was a book by one of their senior officials called Scott Birkin. And he said, in the morning, I like to play golf. So I do. And then in the afternoon and into the evening, that's when I do my work. Because what he says is my rhythm is not the same rhythm as a job description or a standardized working pattern. Now, again, you may think, well, how does that work in healthcare? How does that work in science? How does that work in manufacturing and industry? We're in a world now where the sun doesn't set. We're in the world now where your colleagues are potentially more likely to be in Singapore than they are on the next desk. So why are we obsessed with this 9 to 5, commute when everybody else commutes, get on a train when everybody else gets on a train, when actually we could see work as a platform that we connect to whenever it's best for us to connect to? And I'll give you some examples of where people have done this both in an analog and in a digital way. And then we see this other concept which sometimes gets people wanting to throw large pieces of paper at me, the demise of the manager. Because what I then see when I say this is lots of people say, yeah, but I'm a manager. That means I'm completely irrelevant now. And then I hopefully reassure them that they're not irrelevant unless they carry on managing in the way they are. Because I see a different sense in what people need from a manager. They no longer need a manager who is like an extension of the machine themselves, who plots out routines and who criticizes them for deviations from standardized paths. We need somebody who can put their arm around people and say, be at your best, I'm here to help when you need it. For people to grow, for people to understand their cognitive power and their physical power, I think we need somebody who's more an inspirational source than a chastising enforcer. So I see more of what in the IT industry is often referred to as a scrum master, somebody who holds a centralized kind of power for people around them. So not people at the apex, not people at the top of an organizational structure, but within it, creating what I call almost like a centrifugal force, a place of safety where people can experiment and can find themselves and can explore different skills, knowing that the manager's there to help them be brilliant, not to force them to comply. There's a totally different mindset I see in this. And this does work even in heavy industry. GE make jet engines for Boeing aircraft in North Carolina, and they don't have any managers anymore. So people who assemble some of the most intricate machinery that transports us across the globe are not reliant on managerial routines, but on somebody who can help by leading from within for a team of engineers who just want to make brilliant jet engines. So if it can work in that environment, I challenge that it can't work in others. But I think we need to think differently about 20th century technology that's management and think about 21st technology, which is more about a liberating force for good. And linked to that then is potentially a total change in the thing that my profession in HR has been largely obsessed with. You know, the organisation chart? That thing that says who reports to who? That thing that sort of defines you by a box? That thing that HR think if you tinker with the organisation chart, that's your restructure. No, that's just a map. And so what I'm seeing now is that the hierarchical model of old is already starting to be crumbled and eroded and challenged. It might exist in a softer sense than it does now, but I'm not so bothered about whether the hierarchy lives or dies, although I quite dramatically title it the death of the hierarchy. But instead, the concept is one of a wirarchy, that we're wired and connected to each other in a way that doesn't follow a linear pyramidal structure as much anymore. Because a lot of organizations are starting to talk about this: agility, adaptability, about flatness, about delayering, or as some people call it, right-sizing, which tends to be a little bit of a vulgar term. But I guess what we're now starting to see is people understanding the flow of work doesn't go top to bottom, bottom up. Well, it rarely goes bottom up anyway, but it works in a messy, almost like intuitive, natural organism sense, that the only way to define it is to just look at the connecting points, to look at where decisions are taken, to look at where innovation should flourish and be shared. So when I go into companies and I see them, and often I go into a company that has completely demolished its hierarchy. I have no idea who the CEO is, who has any seniority. I don't care though, because all I want to know is, how do people interoperate? Where are the touch points between people, both in product sense, in delivery sense, in service sense, and so on. And again, I'm going to give you some examples of proof, if you want, that you do not need to conventionalize your structure to hierarchical. You just need people to know where they're connected best. So that's what I start to see, is that the hierarchy will go, and with it becomes what I consider to be the kind of life force of any organization. You may know of a Massachusetts Institute of Technology professor called Peter Senge, who created the concept of the learning organization. This is an organization that in itself does not have a static view of itself, that considers itself to be a vehicle or a vessel for learning about what the best products and the best services and the best way to align its resources. So it's this concept that I think comes to life when you remove some of the inhibitions and the structures, with blocking bureaucratic processes, with overly zealous managers, and with a structure that people feel they have to comply with. So if you remove all that, you can then do what I call democratized learning. But this is where learning is set free. This is where learning becomes wild. This is where learning is no longer packaged as a privilege or an episodic event that you have to beg and plead and say, can I please go on that course next February? This is where learning happens when you need it, how you need it, from whoever you need it, and comes from those four elements. Firstly, by nature, when we let learning free, it becomes social. So it actually becomes a positive thing for you to not hoard your knowledge, but to literally inflict it on other people, to share it with others, to generously donate everything you know, because that's the point in you knowing it in the first place. You know it, you apply it, you make it work, you share it with others. That's the philosophy behind it. It's also emergent. So there's something about learning that we often think, I need to learn how to communicate better, so I'm going on a communication skills course. What about the fact that you didn't know exactly what it is in terms of communication that you needed to perfect? So you experiment and you allow the learning need to emerge from your experiments, which are often random, which are often not even connected to the art of communication. You may study Native American philosophy, and in it you find how you distill key words into a massive transformative purpose. You don't know where your source of an answer comes from until you allow yourself to discover emergence. So there's something around how we've boxed learning up that we need to unbox it. We need to make it something that's in itself like an Olympic sport. And the key thing for us is we can no longer afford, because we haven't got the time, to go on 5-day retreats somewhere just to learn something about coaching. So therefore, we have to miniaturize as much of it as possible and consume it in those miniaturized sound bites. We literally need to Twitterize a lot of our learning. And in fact, I know of one HR team who ripped up all their policies and created a whole new set, but they were only allowed to use 140 characters to display each policy. That forced brevity like I've never seen before. And this concept of playlisting. So let's look at how we consume music. Now, of course, some of us still habitually buy compact discs or albums, but many of us go down the Spotify route of somebody else's playlist because it's got all the tracks we want, or we create our own. That's what I'm starting to see coming from learning now, is that people who know certain things can create a playlist for you to learn via them. So I think this is what we'll see as a result of setting learning free. And this will power our organizations into the future. This is where we find how we adapt, how we keep tuned in to a wide and disparate range of sources and resources. And then we have this one, which I sometimes get into trouble for, because the word disruption has become something that's a bit overused. So people will often accuse people who jump on the disruption word as being a bandwagoner and a kind of trendy frame. But what I'm talking about here is that we are restless about how good we are and the company that we work with is. And so by virtue of that, our restlessness is because we want to be better all the time. It's like continuous improvement manifested in your approach to your everyday life. And so these things on the right, hackathons, inclusiveness, open source, and having it normalized, become the traits of a company that disrupts itself, a company that doesn't settle for being okay or good enough. It wants to be better consistently, continuously. And so in order to do that, you can't just rely on research and development. You can't just rely on the occasional employee engagement survey. You absolutely need to get everybody to think, it's my responsibility for my level of performance. What can I hack to create a better version of what I do, regularly and incessantly? And again, the best companies that I see there with the most sort of opportunities in front of them, the most sustainable kind of performance levels, are all ones who kind of rip it up and start again quite regularly. And then the last one, which I tend to find reassures a lot of people, is that in amongst all this digital stuff, in amongst all this disruption, in amongst all this kind of picking things apart, we find a situation that we want things to be craftful. We want to rediscover what making things looks like. We want to be part of some artistic enterprise, not just a functional enterprise. There's a social platform a bit like eBay called Etsy, where people can knit things and make jewelry and whatever and sell it. Now you might think, well, how can you make a living out of that? Well, some people like to and some people do. Etsy itself as a platform is worth about $30 billion because so much transaction goes through this artistic platform. So I think we'll start to see us thinking about what we can do a little bit more on top of all the digital support and the kind of automation that we have around us. And I think we'll rediscover what it is to make things, to be part of an artistic movement for change. So there they are. Those are the 7 dimensions, okay? So digitization, decline, And what I did was I found those human traits map pretty nicely across to those 7 elements. So for our convenience and connectedness, that's where the digital comes in. For our purpose and meaning, that's changing work from jobs to being much more about purposeful work. That we want inspiration and hope, not just being managed. That our adaptability and collaboration comes from being part of a network, not just an organism structure. That our learning and discovery is fueled by the fact that we have now access to pretty much anything we want to learn. That our invention and creativity comes when we're allowed to innovate and hack our working processes. And that ultimately making and fulfillment drives some of our sense of purpose and gift to the world. So where does this happen? So I'm just going to give you 2 stories. The first one is in Europe and is a nursing organisation called Buurtzorg, and that's the chief executive there, Jos de Blok. I don't know if you know the story of Buurtzorg, but it's one of the ones that gives me the most hope for where we'll find gainful employment in the future, because we're all living longer, we're all getting older, but some of our body parts still need to be a little bit serviced. So what Jos's team do is they go into houses where people have particular medical needs and look after them. Now, when Jos was a nurse, one of the things that frustrated him about that, and you can probably sense this in the way you experience work now, there was bureaucracy, there was targets, there was KPIs, there was strategies, there was all sorts of stuff, which he said wasn't helping any patient at all feel more cared for, feel healthier, feel more responsible for their own well-being. So when he started Buurtzorg, he said to a group of nurses, what could we do to put the patient at the centre of our healthcare? And most of the answers were, get rid of the bureaucracy, get rid of the KPIs, get rid of the stats, get rid of the crap, and let's focus on people. So Jos allowed that to happen. So the nurses would go and spend time with their patients. They would sit and understand them. They'd know who they were. They'd understand their capabilities. They'd have cups of coffee. They'd invite neighbours in. They would create a socialised environment. And it started to work because patients would start to look after themselves a little bit more. Because they felt like they had a friend as well as somebody looking after their medical needs, their kind of mental view of the world changed and they became less sluggish and slightly more up about life. So I think what Jos's team did was they unravelled what was going wrong with nursing and put it right. But as they grew, as more people wanted to work the Buurtzorg way, Jos found himself in a situation where he was tempted to create structure. He was tempted to put in some bureaucracy. So he spoke to his nurses and he agreed a way that he could do this. And the mechanism was that they organised themselves into teams of 12. No more than 12, no less than 10. And what happened within that was then that those 12 people had complete autonomy about how they delivered the services in their areas. So if they were a bit behind, they might ask a neighbouring group of nurses to lend them some support, etc., etc. You get the drill. And the way he enabled that to be connectable, he wanted a social network that would link people. It was in the early days of Facebook, and Jos could clearly see what it was doing for us. So what Jos said was, let's connect people through a social network. Now, at the time that he was going out, there wasn't things like Yammer and Facebook at work, so he created his own social network. So he created a Buurtzorg technology. Now, if we look at Buurtzorg, so their sort of story takes us back to the early 2000s into now, they're a 15 billion euro business. He advises the US, China, Sweden, Germany about home healthcare. He's tried to advise the NHS in the UK, but we just won't listen. Where's that sound familiar? So he sells his technology, he sells his story, and what's happened is Buurtzorg consistently is the highest ranked employer in the Netherlands for the way they look after their people. But the healthcare has been audited by Ernst & Young and is exactly on a par with all of those healthcare providers in terms of monetary efficiency. So it doesn't cost Buurtzorg any more to do it the way they do it. So the income they get and the execution they deliver is consistent. But patient care, patient satisfaction and employee satisfaction are through the roof. Now you tell me which is the better measure for healthcare. Sustainable, yes. Patient care, that's why they're there. So Buurtzorg, as an example, is proof that actually if you deconstruct, if you socially connect, if you let people flourish, each team of 12 nurses has their own learning budget. They have no central control. And so when the nurses need to spend money, they decide on what they spend money on. And again, it's proven to be a more frugal but effective way of how you run the finances in a massively distributed organisation. Something like 9,000 at least nurses now work for Buurtzorg. And everybody else in home healthcare in the Netherlands wants to work for Buurtzorg. So Jos's marketing budget for promoting Buurtzorg as a place to work is zero because everybody knows the story. And if you work in healthcare in the Netherlands, you want to work for Buurtzorg. The other example is a technology company in Michigan. And I spent a few days in the summer with these guys. There's about 80 of them. So it's a small company. And they are called Menlo Innovations. And some of the things that are most amazing about Menlo are based around the fact that they have no managers at all. They're a software company without any managers. So you kind of think, well, maybe I've heard that story before in pretty much every software company. Their unique point, though, is that Menlo Innovations' production of software is built around the principle of pairing. So you will always work in a pair. You will always have a work colleague working with you. So he has a concept, he calls it high-tech anthropology, because his designers of software don't just think, what does this latest website gadget gizmo look like? They go and work in things like hospitals, they go and hang around in places like garages and repair shops, and they find out how people in those environments need to use technology. So here's the most stark example of how that works. They were building an engine diagnostic system for a big bus company in the US. And so his high-tech anthropologists just went and hung out in the garages. And what they saw is every single garage technician uses rubber gloves. And so if a garage technician is using rubber gloves and they're using a technology device, guess what happens? With rubber gloves and an iPad, it doesn't work. Because it's built around fingertip sensitivity. So they changed the dynamic of their user experience completely to be pressure sensitive, not just fingertip sensitive like the normal thing. Because they didn't want to take the gloves off, use the technology, put the gloves on, go and do something with the engine. So they're thinking about their user experience so deeply, it's unreal. The other thing that's great about Menlo is that all their coding then is done in pairs. And so when Rich is the CEO there, Rich Sheridan, when his first group of clients came to him and said, so let's get this right. So when you build our software, we're paying you twice for the coding. And Rich is saying, it's not that. He's saying, we've got 2 people looking at your code constantly. And so they said, okay, well, let's just see how this goes. Now, what Rich's team have been able to do is prove that the pairing mechanism has a number of benefits which result in the fact that really these people aren't paying Rich more. Because what Rich's pairs do is they close the gap between software error and software error detection to literally nanoseconds. So Rich's team in Michigan do not have a customer support service. They don't have a help desk for any of their software. And in their 15 years of operating, in the last 12 years since they've adopted this system, they have had no software emergency ever. So when they release their software, it works. They don't need to fix bugs. They don't need to have calls from clients. Because the coders work in pairs so voraciously, they check each other's quality as they're building it. You may have a brand new coder who joins an experienced coder. So if they're working on a 3-week project, by the end of that 3 weeks, that brand new coder knows a lot more from that experienced coder. So it's a good learning tool. It's like literally mentoring on speed. But the fact that they create such high quality software is important for most of their clients because they are providing software for not just engine diagnostic systems, but airplane management systems, kidney dialysis machines, incubators, and heart monitors. This is software that can't go wrong. This is why Rich's clients keep coming back to him all the time. And Rich has sort of voraciously resisted growing the company to bigger lengths because he's happy with the niche they have and he's happy creating the model that he's got for the people that he has. But a third of Rich's income now comes from him teaching people how they work. So 2/3 of their income comes from software support and software build. A third comes in Rich teaching other technology companies how they do what they do. So his massive transformative purpose is to end human suffering as it relates to technology. He knows he doesn't want to do that by creating the next Google, but he's happy to train and teach every other software company in the world to do it the Menlo way. So Menlo's a classic example where their technology largely is what he calls high-speed voice technology, talking. So his people talk to each other in pairs. He has a stand-up meeting in the office every morning where for 15 minutes they all talk about what's their biggest problem and their biggest challenge and their biggest success of the day. And often just that stand-up meeting in one room creates solutions out of a 15-minute catch-up. So it's a place that's social. It's a place that uses digital in the right way. It's a place that genuinely has no managers. It's a place where people don't have job descriptions, but they have work to do, where people look after each other, where learning is democratized, and where people feel craftful about their product. Lots more of this is contained in a book by a guy called Frederick Laloux. So he wrote a book called Reinventing Organizations, which is where I took the Buurtzorg story from. There's a number of different companies in the book who are changing the way work is done, who are creating something more soulful, as Fred calls it, about work. And so Fred says there's something in the air. And I think what Fred's trying to encapsulate is we've had enough of mechanized, boxed up, stifling work, and we want to be set free. And this book is part of a movement to move organizations into what Fred calls a teal state of being. So I'll leave that one up there. And often people say, well, that's fair enough. You've got Menlo and Buurtzorg and a couple of others maybe. No, there's tons of them. These are people who are changing the rules. These are people who are creating an entirely different ecosystem for work. Let's just give Patagonia a name check. Patagonia make outdoor sporting goods. When Yvon Chouinard, the CEO, started to work for Patagonia, he said, I want us to be the most ethical maker of stuff. On Black Friday, Patagonia have just donated £10 million entirely to charity. So everything Patagonia made on Black Friday has gone into worthwhile environmental causes. These are people who you don't need any employer branding for largely because people know these are the places where you're allowed to be human, brilliant, and there's a future. So a whole range of companies there. Some of them you may know, like Semco has been around for a long time, not managed and so on. Mondragon is a big Spanish conglomerate, anything from mining and quarrying to consulting services and accountancy. They've been going for about 50 years. They have about 60,000 people. And apparently Mondragon have never sacked anybody in their entire existence. There's a story about how people come and go, of course, but they've never forcibly sacked anybody. It's a cooperative. People own a stake in Mondragon. If people have done something wrong, they answer to their peers. So there isn't a case that it's not a mischievous circumstance, but they have never sacked anybody in all their years of operating. And so all these companies, and these as well, these are companies which again have created a whole different paradigm or environment for work. Morningstar, the example there, is probably one you've heard something of in Harvard Business Review. They've been operating for several decades now, processing tomatoes in California. So they grow tomatoes, they can tomatoes, they pulp tomatoes. So if you have a pizza in America, it's probably got Morningstar tomatoes in its base. Again, no managers. In all their years of operating, they've never had managers. Teams collaborate on what's called a colleague letter of understanding. So if you're in the picking team, you have a memorandum of understanding with the washing team about how you deliver the tomatoes and how it all links together. So Morningstar is a great example. Gore has been operating in a sort of managerless environment for years. All sorts of companies like this are changing the way we look at what business is all about. And there's more. So Menlo is part of a movement around freedom-centered work, and I'm connected to this organization, World Blue, based in the US, who looks at organizations who are built from freedom, not fear, who are built on a liberating sense, not a controlling sense. So coming back to what Gary Hamill said earlier on, you've probably heard of Zappos, you may have heard of ISEC. These are organizations whose structure allows people to be themselves, and people aren't stifled from showing individuality, and are largely led in a sort of looser construct than most of the organizations you've been more familiar with up to now. So I've got lots of friends in companies like that, and it's nice to see and hear about these examples firsthand. But on internet sites and some examples of these companies, they're starting to give us the code of the future. They're starting to help us understand how we can create a workplace in the 21st century that helps fuse technology and human endeavor and builds itself around freedom, not fear. If you want to know more about future, these are 4 just representatives of a number of people who will tell you a little bit more about it. So you've got Magnus Lindqvist, who I opened with a quote about sexiest words in the business language. You've got Nilofer Merchant from the US, who talks about how social eras are changing the way that the power dynamic is shifting in the workplace. You have Rohit Talwar, who's a British guy who talks about some of the things I've mentioned to you today, like the technology and the 3D printing and all that kind of stuff. And Jacob Morgan, who's very central around the HR world. So he talks a lot about HR's role in the future of work. So you've got a Swede, a couple of Americans, and a British guy. And so this is where I kind of think HR's got its role. It can be this analyst, so it can understand data, it can work with patterns, it can help us understand what the trends are in the workplace. So I think it's now time to start knocking on some boardroom doors and going, are you really sure we've got that massive transformative purpose? Are you really sure we can connect with people in a freedom sense based on information that I see? They're also likely to take a leaf out of Menlo Innovations book and look at anthropology, start thinking about human interoperability, and being a hacker and creating some new innovative systems, and look at how we can explore a lot more around us. If you want to know how you map this out, you can just literally take a blank sheet of paper, put those 7 dimensions together and start thinking which one talks to me the most, which one has the most impact that I can start to deliver, and literally start to sketch out your organization in a modeling context and start to build something a little bit more futuristic. So take it as a blank canvas, take it as something that's unique to your organization. I've got a book coming out in October 2017. I just thought I'd plug it because I haven't done so far. So it's being published by Kogan Page, and it's called Transformational HR. And what I'm hoping to do is set a brand new ticker for HR's world. And I just wanted to leave you with that quote. So I think if anything sums up what we're talking about today, it's this. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. Do that, and that's what the world needs, more people to come alive. I think I'm done. Thank you very much.
Don't go.
I'm not
We
done.
might have some more questions.
Some questions.
Work will be more project-oriented,
Yeah.
2 months, 3 months,
Yeah.
4 months.
Yeah.
And how to make that we will bring family with, or
Sure. Yeah.
the family?
Yeah.
Regarding the family.
So it's a great question. So I think what we're talking about there is the whole kind of construct of the regularity of employ and the certainty that brings in terms of provision, perhaps for the family, and so on. So I guess my feelings on that are that work isn't very family friendly right now. I don't think the regularity of it compensates for the fact that there are many people I know who say, I don't see my children enough. I don't get home in time to say goodnight to them and so on. So what I'm hoping is that with this and the chance to uncouple some of that, we can have a different flow to the way that we operate. So I think we can build more around family friendly. So those companies I talked about, so Bertsorg and Menlo and lots of the others, are literally built from a human being standpoint. So they understand the flow of what we need to spend our time doing. So Menlo's a great example. 5:30 in the office every day, end of day, finished. People go home and have a regular existence. So there's something in the way that we've kind of made work something that's very solo based, and it's just down to me to do all my tasks, and if I haven't done them, I've got to put in a really long shift. Those companies say, I need some help, and people mobilise and move around. So I hear stories now of even banking organisations are realising just how much stress and pressure people are under, so they're making it keener and easier for people to help each other out. So I think that's what I'll see us doing more of, is that we aggregate effort so that we can have a more distinct shift between what our life needs and what our work needs are. And so tech will help us do it, but the communality and the sense of camaraderie and team is essential to that as well. So we can design it both in a system sense and in a human sense. That's how I see it going. Helpful?
For one worker, to be effective and to be good, so you should be harmonized.
Yeah.
And the family is one of 3 points of the harmonization.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things I'll say I've seen is that a lot of modern workplaces purport to have colleague and friendly relationships, but don't really build the fabric of that enough into what a company's all about. So those companies I'm talking about there, who you are and how you interoperate with your colleagues is as critical as how good you are at what you do. And I think that's the shift that HR can make. The fact that we can look after each other is as important as how well we execute. And I think we're starting to see how much that matters to people, because people are leaving companies where that toxicity is there, joining companies and taking salary cuts and taking risks in freelance employ because they can build their life around it. And more of that's going to happen, and more people will need to listen to that. So I'm with you. Cool. Any other questions? Yes, got one over there.
My name is Daniela Barbarco-Tolinko. I'm the CEO of Business Intelligence Center.
Yep.
And we're organizing business hackathons for companies, just
Great.
this crowdsourcing communities
Excellent.
and information, innovation from that part.
Yeah.
So we just recently had 2 very successful ones,
Good.
providing many solutions. But how do you see, why is this so important? Because we really want to stress that factor in the future, not only of work, but development of the companies.
Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
Great point. So what we heard there then is an approach to innovation that includes people from all sorts of aspects of a company. So I think that's what I see as a differentiator between those companies that I think are really going to survive in the future and those which are going to really struggle, is that there's no tightness to innovation. It's so open, it's unreal. So, we're seeing people who are setting up company wikis and running hackathons, but also allowing people who have absolutely nothing to do with that company to help shape what it does. We're in a position where we've got so much information, we should know what consumers want, but we know what we're like as consumers. We will make choices based on not necessarily determinable factors. So Amazon might think it knows what we're going to buy, but we might make a whole range of choices based on the ethics of the company. Amazon couldn't predict that because that's an emotive quality. What you're talking about there, I think, is how do we create innovation that comes from that emotional and creative center that technology just cannot match, cannot map, and never will. And you involve your community as widely as possible. I have this philosophy with companies. Often HR teams come to me and say, who should we benchmark to find the best HR practices? And I say, don't benchmark, stretch mark. Go to a company that has nothing to do with HR and look at how it works. And then try and build some of that into your processes. So I think that's what I'd say. Get outside your norms and create that sort of collaborative environment. Innovation just bursts out all over the place. So I'm glad to hear that you've done that. Cool.
Okay, just one last question.
One last one?
Then,
okay.
I'm sure you're going to be available for other questions.
I'm going to hang
during
around
the
as
break.
long as people want. Yeah.
So we have one question, then
cool.
some of our colleagues have something to share. And then
cool, okay.
Okay, Oliver Schmidt from Glassford International. Would you recommend to prepare an organization for the future as you described by saying by 1st of January I'm changing everything at once, or would you rather recommend to go by small
great
steps?
point. So, thanks very much for that. I've had that question before, so I think a lot of people say, right, so at a point in time we can just do all this stuff and get ready. No, the way the world works isn't like that anymore. So I think what you do is you pick the things where you've got the most to gain and the most energy towards it, and try and find the best amount of people who can support you in that, because none of this stuff gets done in a boardroom or on a strategy. This stuff gets done by people. So I think find the thing that's going to make you different and brilliant, get the people with the most energy around it, and then start to build things. So I think just make that first step, and then a second step, and then a fourth step, and then an eighth step. So you can create your own exponential path. It doesn't all have to fit. You don't have to look 15 years in advance and track back every step. Have something that's good enough for 15 years in advance, and then start thinking, how do I start that journey? And then you'll work out the next step as you go along, and you'll grow movement and you'll iterate. So I think that's what I'd say. Yeah. The good news is the future doesn't start on the 1st of January 2017. 2029, maybe. Okay, cool. Is it coffee time?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Timms. Although we think you were talking about us. Although we think you were talking about us, our generation, because we are the future, I'm sure that everyone in this room could find themselves in your words. Don't you think so, Tina?
Seveda, strinjam se s teboj. Generacija X je še kako aktivna. Aktivno delovna pa postaja tudi generacija Z. O čem bodo oni govorili? Kako bodo oni gledali na prihodnost? In ne nazadnje, kakšno bo poimenovanje generacije po generaciji Z? Bo to generacija žnjo?
Tako, kot ste torej slišali, bomo morali v prihodnosti oblikovati popolnoma novo abecedo oziroma terminologijo za poimenovanje naših novih generacij. Pa da se vrnem k temu, kaj bodo te generacije počele oziroma s čim bodo se ukvarjale. Verjetno tudi s tem, kar smo se danes naučili tukaj mi. Verjamem namreč, da jih boste z veseljem podučili o teh novih idejah, strasteh in pa zamislih.
Strast postane delo, ko imaš delo rad in imaš za to tudi potrebne pogoje. Kot sta recimo dobra kavica ali čaj. In vse to vam bomo tudi sedaj ponudili. Ko se v naslednjih 15 minutah zopet srečamo, vam bomo predstavili našo raziskavo, nato pa vas bomo prepustili v roke doktorja Aleksandra Zadela in njegovim odgovorom na vprašanje, kako nagovoriti generacijo Biberja.
Prihodnost torej ustvarjamo skupaj. Ustvarjajo odnosi in zaupanje. Iskreno smo veseli, da v prihodnost potujemo skupaj z našimi sponzorji, ki verjamejo v ljudi, ki verjamejo v vrednote dela in se ambiciozno spogledujejo s prihajajočimi izzivi. Pa, da ne bomo govorili samo z mojimi besedami, vas vabim, da si pogledate filmček, v katerem so dokazi o naših željah v prihodnosti.
From SAP SuccessFactors side, again, we feel that success is simply human. We have tools to support this process, an incredibly deep suite across the whole talent scope, including recruiting, onboarding, performance and goals, learning, analytics, and compensation. SuccessFactors essentially is a mile wide and a mile deep. But we work with our clients to make sure that they start at the points that are most important for them.
V humanitarni dejavnosti, ki jo uresničujemo za družine, otroke in mlade Slovenije, so izjemno pomembna družbeno odgovorna podjetja. Eden teh, na katerega smo izjemno ponosni in je z nami že nekaj let, je zavarovalnica Generali. Vključuje se v humanitarne projekte, Volja vselej najde pot in družinski center. Z Generalijem smo pomagali več kot 90 družinam, ki so živele pod robom preživetja po vsej Sloveniji.
Meceneje in S-Mind sodelujemo s podjetjem Bisnode že vrsto let. Naše sodelovanje se je začelo kar nekaj let nazaj, kjer smo z orodjem in storitvijo bonitete integrirali v naš CRM sistem, da smo lahko prodajalcem omogočili dostop do informacij in podatkov, ki so bile kritične v vsakodnevnem poslovanju. To sodelovanje smo naknadno potem nadgradili z znanjem v okviru projekta Spletni trgovci leta, kjer dejansko sodelujemo in s pomočjo različnih metodologij ustvarjamo neko dodatno vrednost in jo kot tako tudi prezentiramo potem trgu.
Da se na Bisnode storitve lahko zanesemo 24 ur na dan. Spremljanje novih trendov, povezovanje z ostalimi podjetji, big data in vpetost v mednarodno poslovanje jih zagotovo postavljajo v sam vrh svetovnih ponudnikov tovrstnih rešitev.
Ker je danes težko dobiti dobre sodelavce, smo v to vključili že vrtce, kamor vabimo naše najmlajše, da si ogledajo naše prostore in potem seveda nadaljujemo s poklicnimi šolami, kjer nudimo bodočim potencialnim našim sodelavcem izobraževanje za delovno mesto avtomehanika, kleparja ali pa avtoličarja. Pri tem pa ne dajemo poudarka samo na tehnično znanje, ampak tudi na tako imenovane mehke vsebine, saj našim zaposlenim omogočamo od projekta Živimo zdravjo, ki vključuje teke, fitness, smučanje, do raznega izobraževanja o varni prehrani, stresu na delovnem mestu in podobno.
V novi strategiji Petrola do leta 2020 smo si zadali ambiciozne cilje, da bomo s sodobnimi energetsko in okoljskimi rešitvami še naprej zadovoljevali potrebe naših strank, tako na poti, doma kot v službi. Skupaj z našimi partnerji bomo ustvarjali nizkoogljično družbo.
Trgovina sodi med bolj dinamične in kompleksne dejavnosti. Kupcem ni dovolj slediti in se jim prilagajati, zanje je treba ustvarjati novosti, se jim približati, kjer sami želijo, kot sami želijo. Skratka, biti inovativen. Trgovina niso več le izdelki, so izkušnje, doživetja, mnenja, ki jih delimo, trendi, ki jih zasledujemo. Sodelovanje s tako velikim zahtevnim naročnikom kot je Mercator nam omogoča, da se stalno izboljšujemo in iščemo nove rešitve. Presegamo ustaljeno in izzivamo obstoječe. To je najboljše, kar si kot podjetje lahko želimo.
V Avtomoto zvezi Slovenije se aktivno zavzemamo za sodobne oblike mobilnosti, od skupne vožnje, souporabe vozil, javnega transporta na zahtevo do okolju prijaznih oblik pogona vozil. Podpiramo vse oblike mobilnosti, ki se pojavljajo že danes in so usmerjene v jutri, naše poslanstvo pa ostaja nespremenjeno, vaša varnost na cesti je naša skrb danes, je bila včeraj in bo jutri.
Da smo zavezani k razvoju kadrov, dokazuje tudi zadnji certifikat Top Employer in predvsem, ker smo se osredotočili tudi na delo z mladimi, na tistimi, ki končujejo izobrazbo in imajo izzive na trgu delovne sile. Vsako leto, tokrat letos že drugič, organiziramo poletno šolo. Poletno šolo, kjer povabimo potencialne bodoče zaposlene, ki delujejo in delajo z nami na projektih, ki bodo v Novi Ljubljanski banki ugledali luč v prihodnosti in nam tudi pomagali izpolniti strategijo.
Pri iskanju novih zaposlenih se povezujemo z različnimi fakultetami in poskušamo mlade ljudi pripeljati že v času študija v okviru obveznih študijskih praks. Zavedamo se namreč, da so ravno ti mladi nadarjeni ljudje prihodnost našega podjetja, hkrati pa seveda tudi prispevajo k vsakdanjemu širjenju obzorij in kompetenc. Postajamo podjetje, ki temelji na ustvarjalni uporabi poglobljenega znanja, deluje s hitrostjo spreminjajoče se kulture in zna povezovati komplementarne spretnosti v novo kakovost.
Brez sprememb ne gre. Ni napredka. In tega se, kot ste videli, dobro zavedajo tudi naši pokrovitelji, ki niso zgolj slučajno uspešna podjetja in gospodarske družbe. Ni naključij. Brez dela ne gre, trdega dela, predanosti in pa sprememb. Med odmorom me je nekaj izmed vas vprašalo, ali je to, kar ste videli danes, res tisto pravo delovno okolje, kot ga živimo v Competu, in lahko rečem, da je resnično. Pri nas spodbujamo druženje, spodbujamo kreativnost, ker takrat ljudje na plano s svojo unikatno osebnostjo prinesejo res neverjetne rezultate. In pa obilo smeha, veselja, to vam kar priznam. Predvsem pa veliko dela in ne služba s tisto veliko začetnico, ampak delo s strastjo. O tem smo razmišljali tudi v naši raziskavi, razmišljali smo o delu v prihodnosti, o spremembah, razmišljali smo o delovnih vrednotah, se spraševali, a je to a je delo služba ali kaj več, in se vprašali, ali smo pripravljeni na spremembe, ali smo pripravljeni na prihodnost dela. Petra, kaj pravi naša raziskava, kaj smo ugotovili?
Hvala, Nina. Raziskave smo se v Competu lotili, ker nas je zanimalo, kako pa smo v Sloveniji pripravljeni na te spremembe v prihodnosti. Raziskavo smo izvedli v septembru s pomočjo spletne ankete. Tu nam je pomagala raziskovalna agencija Aragon. Naš vzorec je sestavljalo 160 udeležencev, ki so zaposleni, ki so vključeni v odločitve povezane z delom. Pri izvedbi raziskave so nam pomagali partnerji raziskave, to so Združenje Menedžer, Slovenska gospodarska zbornica, Slovenska kadrovska zveza, Ameriška, Nemška in Britanska gospodarska zbornica. Ti so nam pomagali oblikovati kakovosten vzorec udeležencev. Če na kratko opišemo vzorec, imeli smo približno enakomerno porazdelitev glede na spol, glede na to, ali so zaposleni prihajali iz podjetja, ki je mednarodno oziroma slovensko, in tudi glede na samo velikost podjetja. Približno tretjina udeležencev je bilo zaposlenih iz uprave, vodstva in pa lastnikov, druga tretjina so predstavljali zaposleni na področju kadrovske stroke in zadnja tretjina zaposleni iz srednjega menedžmenta. V nadaljevanju bomo pogledali tiste res ključne ugotovitve, podrobnejše rezultati pa bodo na voljo seveda tudi kasneje. V raziskavi smo na podlagi mednarodnih virov oblikovali 11 trendov, ključnih trendov, za katere predvidevamo, da bodo sooblikovali prihodnost dela. Te trende imate napisane tudi na teh majhnih listkih na mizah, tako da si jih lahko preberete, da boste malo bolje sledili, ne bi jih pa jih zdaj trenutno šli malo bolj podrobno čez. Zanimalo nas je za teh 11 trendov, kako dobro jih poznamo, v kakšni meri menimo, da bodo za nas pomembne in kako dobro se na njihovo vpeljavo počutimo pripravljene. Pa si poglejmo ključne ugotovitve. Na začetku nas je zanimalo, kako so udeleženci na splošno dobro seznanjeni s trendi prihodnosti. Ugotovili smo, da trende kar dobro poznamo. Kar 66% udeležencev je odgovorilo, da trende bodisi dobro ali celo v celoti poznajo. Medtem ko so bili udeleženci iz kadrovskega področja in srednjega menedžmenta pri teh pričakovanjih oziroma pri tej seznanjenosti precej podobni. Sem se zmotila, se pravi, kadrovski zaposleni iz področja kadrovske stroke so bili tisti, ki so bili s temi trendi bolj seznanjeni. Kar 88% jih je odgovorilo, da trende dobro oziroma v celoti poznajo. Poleg tega smo ugotovili, da bodo omenjeni trendi, ki smo jih izpostavili, prisotni tudi v slovenskem prostoru. Kar 43% udeležencev je odgovorilo, da bodo ti trendi zagotovo prisotni. Tukaj pa imamo to razliko, se pravi, da kadrovska služba in srednji vodstveni kader so pri teh predikcijah bolj optimistični, medtem ko so zaposleni z področja uprave in vodstva morda malo bolj zadržani. Ko smo udeležence za vsakega izmed 11 omenjenih trendov povprašali, s katerimi trendi so najbolj seznanjeni oziroma v kakšni meri so seznanjeni s posameznim trendom, so se najbolj izpostavili tile trije. Se pravi, pomen vodstvenih kompetenc, moč timov oziroma oblikovanje tudi ploske organizacije, kot je prej omenil Peri, in pa oblikovanje kulture učenja, ki je podprta z tehnologijo. Isti trije trendi so se opazili tudi kasneje, ko smo udeležence povprašali, kolikšni meri menijo, da bo posamezen trend pomemben za njihovo organizacijo v prihodnosti. Kolikšni meri menijo, da je njihova organizacija že danes pripravljena na vpeljavo teh trendov in pa tudi na področju katerih trendov največ že danes delujejo. To so nekje naša močna področja. V drugi strani so med trende, kjer so udeleženci izpostavili nižje stopnje seznanjenosti, sodili tile štirje. Se pravi, trend odprtih inovacij, poznavanje uporabe napredne analitike pri odločitvah, poenostavitev dela in delovnih procesov in pa vpeljava digitalnih kadrovskih procesov. Tudi tukaj se je pojavil podoben trend, se pravi, ta 4 področja, ki smo jih najmanj poznali, smo se na njih čutimo najmanj pripravljene, zdijo se nam najmanj pomembna in tudi danes že delamo najmanj na njihovem področju oziroma na njihovi vpeljavi. Na trend odprtih inovacij se na primer čuti dobro pripravljenih le 33% udeležencev, se pravi nekje dobra tretjina. Ko smo pogledali, kje je razkorak med tem, kako pomemben se nam zdi nek trend za našo organizacijo in to, kako opremljeni se počutimo, kako pripravljeni se počutimo za to, da bomo to spremembo vpeljali v prihodnje, smo ugotovili, da so največji razkoraki na tihle 3 področjih. Na področju napredne analitike, oblikovanja optimalne izkušnje zaposlenih in pa pomena vodstvenih kompetenc. To je razkorak med tem, kako pomemben bo ta trend za našo organizacijo in to, kako se danes počutimo pripravljene nanj, največji. To so tudi 3 področja, kjer bomo morali v prihodnje najverjetneje vlagati največ znanja, največ deljenja dobrih praks, največ spremljanja novosti, zato da bomo razširili svoje poznavanje in razumevanje. Ko smo udeležence vprašali, v kolikšni meri že danes vpeljujejo določene ukrepe za to, da bi sledili tem trendom, smo ugotovili, da je ta stopnja kar precej visoka. 78% vprašanih je odgovorilo, da danes bodisi že vpeljujejo določene ukrepe ali pa so že izvedli določene ukrepe v smeri sprejemanja teh sprememb. Samo 5% je odgovorilo, da v podjetju zaenkrat še niso vpeljali nobenih sprememb. In za na konec, ko smo primerjali razlike med posameznimi skupinami zaposlenih, ki smo jih omenili na začetku, smo ugotovili nekaj zanimivih ugotovitev. Zaposleni iz področja vodstva so nižje kot ostali 2 skupini ocenjevali pomembnost trendov napredne analitike, digitalnih kadrovskih procesov in pa pomena vodstvenih kompetenc. Po drugi strani so se kadroviki počutili manj pripravljene kot ostali 2 skupini na področjih upravljanja raznolikosti, moči timov in poenostavitvi dela. Kar je še bolj zanimivo, je to, da smo opazili razlike pri tem, ko smo udeležence povprašali, če že vpeljujete določene trende v smeri sprememb, na katerih področjih je to, oziroma na področju katerih trendov. Tudi tukaj so bile razlike, kadroviki so namreč izpostavili področje gradnje vodstvenih kompetenc in vpeljave digitalnih kadrovskih procesov, medtem ko je vodstvo izpostavilo oziroma največ poročalo o ukrepih na področju sprememb vrednot in oblikovanja optimalne izkušnje zaposlenih. Zanimiva povezava, da so kadroviki poročali o ukrepih na področju vodstvenih kompetenc in digitalnih kadrovskih procesov, medtem ko je vodstvo, vidimo, da je za njih mogoče to področje, ki je manj pomembno. Zaključili bi lahko, da HR in vodstvo še vedno ne govorita istega jezika. Verjamem, da bi podobne razlike ugotovili tudi v primerjavi z drugimi področji oziroma sektorji. Je pa to znak za to, da moramo kadrovski strokovnjaki še vedno delati, še naprej delati na tem, da širimo svoje znanje, razumevanje tega področja. Po drugi strani pa je to tudi znak, da bo moralo vodstvo, ki je pogosto bolj tehnično, finančno podkovano, posvetiti svojo pozornost tudi tem področjem.
Hvala, Petra. Pa smo res pripravljeni na prihodnost.
Če še nismo pripravljeni, pa zagotovo še bomo. Ugotovili smo namreč v raziskavi tudi, da se to, kako dobro poznamo nek trend, povezuje s tem, kako pomemben se nam zdi in ne nazadnje tudi to, kako pripravljeni smo nanj. Več informacij, kot imamo, bolj se nam zdijo spremembe pomembne in bolj pripravljene se na njih počutimo. Ravno zato je dogodek, kot je današnji, pomemben, ker nam bo pomagal bolj pripravljene zakorakati v prihodnost.
Hvala, Petra. No, kompetki, zagotovo smo pripravljeni na prihodnost. Oblikovali smo svojo drugačno pot, smo optimistični in smo vedri, ampak drzni in izjemno podjetni. Vsak dan znova gradimo in negujemo odnose. Ali delamo prav? Na vsa ta vprašanja nam bo odgovore dal dr. Aleksander Zadel, za katerega verjamem, da ne potrebuje posebne predstavitve. Aleksander, izvoli.
Hvala.
Na Competu verjamem, da smo pripravljeni na izzive prihodnosti. A se strinjaš z mano? Se moraš, ne?
Itak, ja.
Ampak kaj pa Slovenija, kaj pa slovensko gospodarstvo, kaj pa Slovenci? Aleksander, izvoli.
Hvala lepa. Lepo pozdravljeni. Ja. Od tukaj res zgleda impresivno. Hvala, ker ste prišli. Čudovito vas je videti in čudovito je čutiti to energijo današnjega dela in strasti in želje po tem, da zvemo, kaj nas čaka v prihodnosti. Dajmo začeti s sedanjostjo. Zakaj hodite v službo? Ja, hodite, se vozite, ja, dobro zdaj. Ja. Eni se vozite v službo, zakaj se vozite v službo? Zdaj, se veste, kako smo mi psihologi in ti slični profili, ne? Vse je neke škatlice, je res? Škatlice. Zdaj, če ste melanholik, itak nimate druge možnosti, je res? Kaj drugega? Zdaj, če ste flegmatik, ja, takle imamo, pač dokler bo služba, bomo hodili v službo, kaj čemo? Bog ne daj, da so kle koleriki, ne, da sem tu pokazal, kaj hodim v službo, je bentiš. In sangviniki, ne, to smo mi, ne, nekaj moraš delati, dej kle zadelati. Zdaj, obstaja tudi še, to je Jungova tipologija, je res? Obstaja še slovenska tipologija. Če ste ciniki, hodite v službo, zato da uživate. In seveda imate še zadnjo možnost. Da hodite zaradi denarja, ne? Kaj pa? Položnice je treba plačati. In tako naprej. Torej, kakšni so izzivi tega slovenskega profila, tega človeka? Kaj se nam dogaja, da na tem toboganu življenja eni se res smejo, eni res uživajo, materine je pa grozno strah. Je prišel šef v službo? Ja, jebentiš. Ampak ne ti šefi, o katerih je govoril ti peri v prihodnosti, ne? Ti današnji. Zdaj bo treba to kmalu vse v penzijo poslati, da pridejo ti moderni šefi prihodnosti, ne? Ki bojo naredili življenje lepo, flat organizacije, nobene hierarhije in tako naprej. Komaj čakamo, je res? A ja, kje so tu direktorji? Mislim, ne čakamo, tako si želimo, no? V tem smislu sem hotel reči, no? Peri, kje sem mogoče kaj narobe razumel, ali pa mi ni šlo lih misunderstanding, a? Ok, kako najti pravo pot, ne? A je to zdaj jutro, ne, in gremo v lep sončen dan, ali gremo v temo, ali gremo na žurko zvečer? Katera pot je prava? Kaj se nam bo dogajalo v tej prihodnosti, ki si jo želimo, ki jo sanjamo, ki se jo mogoče v bistvu nam dele ne majhne take balončke, ali pa mehurčke, ali pa metuljčke, ali pa iskrice tlele noter, kjer večina ljudi kaj čuti. Torej, kakšno je okolje 21. stoletja? Kaj so resnični izzivi 21. stoletja? Kaj nas čaka? Kaj nas bo doletela? Zdaj, kar se tiče otrok, ste slišali prej naše kompetovce, ne? Zdaj, še nikoli se ni rodilo toliko inteligentnih, briljantnih, neponovljivih in izjemnih otrok. Je res? Si predstavljate, ko se žoga odbije od kolena otroka, ja, Barcelona. Ga že vidimo tam in se rojevajo Ronaldini, Messi, Zidani. Je bentiš, kaj če se vam rodi Nejc? Mislim, razumete, jaz ne vem, a leta 2030, a bojo vsi res top, a bo teh 2% briljantnih ljudi kar nekrat 98% postalo. Mislim, kaj če ne bojo? Mislim, na srečo, če vprašate starše, seveda, čakaj, zakaj ima tvoj otrok trojke? Ma ne, on je inteligenten, samo nima delovnih navad. Ko zika inteligence ni straha, to je vse v redu, poštimano so prinesli s sabo vse, kar rabijo. Ne? Delovne navade, odnos, drža. Jaz danes ne bom več porabil besede drža, ampak meni je nekaj fenomenalnega, attitude rečejo naši kolegi iz Anglije. Ne? Kakšno držo imaš do življenja? Kdo si ti v življenju? Kako se predstavljaš? Kako se postavljaš? Zakaj se zauzemaš? Kje vidiš strast? In kam jo vlagaš in kam jo nosiš? Kako jo doživljaš? No in seveda, razumete, ti otroci, razumete, to ni bojo dali nekaj na YouTube in bojo uspeli, je bentiš. Ker ta dva tipa, ona dva nista 10 let gulla violino, njih je samo Elton John en dan videl. In je rekel, ta dva bom jaz smel zapreti po med skupino. Ni problem, torej YouTube ljudje, Big Brother, ne?
meni je najbolj fenomenalno to, ker na vsakem predavanju jaz vprašam, rečem, ljudje, ne na vsakem, ko govorimo o teh stvareh, rečem, a vi gledate Big Brother? Nobeden. Ma med pauzo, ampak Mirela bi mogla iti že zdavnej ven. In celo vi, ki ne gledate, se smete temu štosu, ki veste, kdo je Mirela. Takle imamo, rečejo flegmatiki, kaj sem že rekel prej, ne? Ok. Torej, kdo zdaj odrašča v 21. stoletju, ne? V 21. stoletju je prst postavljen na kdo si ti. Kaj si ti? Kaj doživljaš? Kaj čutiš? Bodi tukaj in zdaj. Uresniči svoje potenciale. Tako strašljiv je pritisk na individualizacijo, da dejansko ne zgolj starši, ki imamo majhne otroke, večina ljudi je prepričanih, da smo nekaj posebnega, ne? Da smo enkratni, neponovljivi. In pol moramo mi tudi tako zgledati, a ni res? Moramo biti vsi koji škatlice naštimani v nulo in si moramo želeti, ker nismo še take, malo nam še manjka, je res? Tako prepotentni nismo, da bi mislili, da smo že tam. In to je idealen potrošnik, ki čas, energijo, delo, veste, koliko ljudi hodi v fitness, hodi teč, ne zaradi tega, da bi se boljše počutili, da bi boljše zgledali. Imidž, kako izgledaš, je v službi tega, kako se počutiš. Na srečo, če greš teč, se res pol tudi boljše počutiš. To je edina sreča od vsega tega, ne? Da v bistvu kljub vsemu ene povezave pa ene korelacije so. Torej, zdaj, a dejansko res se je najprej rodila X generacija, pa Y, pa Z generacija in tako naprej. Ali se v bistvu dramatično spreminja okolje ljudje? Veste, v zadnjih 10-12 tisoč letih se človek genetsko ni nič posebnega spremenil. Ta zadnja znana mutacija je bila za modre oči 12 tisoč let nazaj. Blondinke ste 15 tisoč let nazaj nekje na tej zemlji. In če gremo gledati naslednjo, za katero vemo, je, kdaj smo postali manj poraščeni, 60-70 tisoč let nazaj. In zdaj se v 50 letih rojevali drugačni otroci kot leta 70 in 70 drugačni kot leta 90. Ne bo držalo. Vprašanje, ki je bilo prej retorično in ni dogovorjeno, kako bomo poimenovali naslednjo generacijo? Diagnozo bo vsak dobil. Svojo diagnozo bo dobil. Ni ženj, ali kako je že rekel naš... Diagnozo je bentiš. 1/3 otrok v slovenskih šolah zmore slediti pouku, če vzame zjutraj Ritalin. Zdravilo, ljudje. Ma ni narobe z otroci, narobe neki ne s šolo, ne vem s čim. Ni danes to predavanje in ne bi kle noter padel to luknjo. Torej, koncept potrošništva nam je jasno, je res? Kdo smo zdaj mi? A bomo vzeli popoldne si čas in gremo na travnik, a gremo malo pogledati, če so lučke, pa če kaj prodaja, če je kakšna stojnica, če je kakšen črn vikend ali pa petek ali pa ne vem kaj. Nikdar ne veš, ne? Nikdar ne veš, kaj človek rabi, pa res rabimo. Lepo prosim. Res rabiš in če že daje na pol zastonj, dajmo mi to vzeti, ne? Torej, koncepta prihodnosti, tisto, kar je najbolj grozno, ni. Saj se spomnite, dosti krat rečem, kdo danes še razmišlja o prihodnosti, tukaj, zdaj. Ko otrok, ne človek, razume koncept delovanja denarja, da bi lahko razumel, da mora cikl ima že 3 v garaži, preraščene, ki jih je prerastel, ko ima 3 prste med ritjo, 4 prste med ritjo in sedežem, rabi novo številko, ker je to dobro za njegov psihomotorični razvoj, ne ker smo potrošniki. Razumete, kdo špara za avto, kdo varčuje za novo hišo, zdaj mora imeti avto, bom že pol malo plačeval, zdaj mora imeti hišo, bom že pol jaz te kredite rešil in tako naprej. Razumete, v nekem smislu, kakor si prihodnost sanjamo in si jo želimo, smo z to New Age-evsko parolo živi tukaj in zdaj obsedeni zgolj od sedanjosti. In vprašanje, če se mi dovolj odgovorno naslavljamo, razmišljamo o tem, kaj bo prihodnost prenesla. Mi postanemo mokri od navdušenja, ko vidimo uspehe Tima Gajserja, Petra Prevca, prej Tine Maze in tako naprej. Ali pa unih 2, Šuliča in tu Čelos. Samo mi si ne predstavljamo, koliko trdih ur dela je tam od zadaj. Priješ službo, nikjer nobenega šefa. Si predstavljate Petra Prevca brez šefa? Tima Gajserja brez šefa? Ne vem, to je retorično vprašanje. Oni kar mal pridejo, pol na neki smuča, pol on skače, oni gre mal na moped, pa se vozi po hribih in dolinah in pol zmaga vse. Ker je pa res talentiran, ker smo mu videli že od rojstva matere pri 3 letih, da od tega otroka nekaj bo. Ali je on garal, ko pri norcih, jaz dostikrat včasih rečem. Dostikrat včasih, ne. Psiholog. Torej, kakšen je modern potrošnik? Razumete, modern potrošnik je mal iz sebe, ne? Je tu zaradi sebe. In zakaj ste vi tukaj? Zaradi njega. Ta formula ne deluje, če smo mi tukaj vsi zaradi sebe. Mi smo družbena in socialna bitja. To je eden prvih izzivov prihodnosti. Kako bomo skrmarili med tema dvema strašljivima poloma neverjetnega individualizma, zavedanja samega sebe v vsem svojem bistvu in krutega in neizpodbitnega dejstva, da smo družbeno bitje, socialno bitje. Koliko individualnosti se bomo odpovedali na račun tega, da bo družba obstala? Ne boste verjeli, kdaj ljudje čutimo večjo potrebo po druženju v skupnosti. Ko začutimo nevarnost. In tisto, kar mene straši kot zunanjega opazovalca modernih trendov sporočanja drug drugemu, da je nekaj narobe, to pomeni modernega evropskega terorizma, ki je zaenkrat še manj dramatičen, kot je bil v 70-ih letih. Bistveno manj mrtvih. Samo nihče ne pozabi zraven povedati, da mediji, ki vam danes v realnem času pripeljijo smrt v tako pred nos, so strašljivo bolj uspešni, kot so bili v 60-ih, 70-ih letih, ko je bilo v Evropi dejansko res tudi precej bolj nevarno živeti, kar se tega tiče. Torej, nas je strah. In tukaj se mi zdi, da je spet stranska škoda ali pa obvod tega, da bomo prišli mogoče do večje potrebe do ene kohezije. Vse veste, kako je Jugoslavija funkcionirala, ko je imela navideznega zunanjega sovražnika. Zelo, zelo kompaktno. In ko je zginil, ko se je razblinil, so šle stvari v nekem smislu po slabem. Torej, če zdaj strnemo situacije, ki mogoče jaz sem vam vedno za enega optimista, ko sem Perija poslušal, jaz nisem niti približno optimist, ne? Tako da ga čim prej nazaj v Anglijo, pa bom pol jaz spet optimistem naprej, tako da srečno, good luck, Peri. Ker on je 3 standardne deviacije tam čez, ne? V tem, kako lepo vidi svet leta 2028-2029. Ne, sega tudi jaz, samo danes vidim, da imam sence v tem svojem pogledu in tako naprej. Ampak vendarle, ne? Torej, kaj bojo morali biti sposobni ljudje tega 21. stoletja, te točke singularity, ne? Ko bo v bistvu naši možgani pa tehnika, ker tam več meje ne bo in bo vse šibalo sem pa tja. Torej, informacije ljudje. Prva stvar, ne, tisti trenutek, ko se bo naš šolski sistem osredotočil na to, da bo otroke namesto tega, da se učijo, koliko kilovatnih ur električne energije smo pred 10 leti pridelali iz termoelektrarne Šoštanj in ne vem kaj, take stvari, ko jih bomo začeli učiti v šolah, kako najti prave informacije, kako ločiti pomembno od nepomembnega, torej preverjati, ne preverjati, ker si skeptik, preverjati, ker si normalen. Včasih so nejeverni Tomaži preverjali vsako stvar. Danes je to drža, ki jo moraš imeti, če nočeš biti mimo, če nočeš v bistvu, deliti s prijatelji, s kolegi, ali pa Bog ne daj v poslovnem okolju informacije, ki so zrasle na zelniku enega portala, ki ne vem jaz kaj, ki jih pobira. Ne? Vsi veste, novinarji ali pa tisti, ki ste iz teh poslov, kako danes lahko tudi nastane informacija. Izjemno pomembno, to smo slišali, wow, eno stvar sem zadev, ne? Sposobnost integrativnega delovanja v kompleksnih timih. Veste, kakšna je razlika med skupino in timom? In pol naštevajo, ki ste študirali management, pa fokus, pa cilj, pa dogovor in tako naprej. Ne bo držalo. Razlika je, po mojem mnenju, zgolj ena. Če v skupini eden ne pride v službo, si ostali samo porazdelijo delo in ga naredijo malo več časa, pa malo bolj se potrudijo. Je res? V timu, če eden ne pride v službo, zadeva stoji. Razumete, če v kirurški ekipi, ki je tim, anestezist ne pride v službo, a bomo kaj operirali danes? Oni bi že, oni se ne strinja. To pomeni, timsko delo prihodnosti je timsko delo, kjer bo za prostor za ljudi, ki dejansko iz unega vica prej, ki so individualisti, ki imajo specifike, ki znajo nekaj narediti več, ki znajo nekaj narediti drugače, ki imajo dodano vrednost. Ti ljudje bojo sestavljali moderne time. Tu bo neverjetno velik pritisk. Niti da govorim, kakšno bo okolje, smo slišali spremembo ves čas, živimo spremembo, neživa narava se spreminja, kako to, da se ne bi šele mi. Torej, skope informacije. Vedno bi rabili še eno informacijo več. Vedno je bilo super vedeti, kaj bo naredila konkurenca, kaj bo naredili potrošniki. Kako zvedeti? Odločanje v realnem času pomeni, zdaj nosi odgovornost za vse tisto, kar bodo posledice ne zgolj zdaj, mogoče še leto ali več. Izjemen pritisk na odločevalce. Ljudje, ki se bojo odločili v prihodnosti, bojo mogli imeti izjemno debelo kožo. In na koncu, ta zadnja stvar, kaj pa vem, če je za slovensko kulturo to najboljša novica, ne? Asertiven, ali pa jaz dostikrat rečem, agresiven odnos do dela. Ne gre za to, da ti delo nekdo delegira. Delo iščeš, delo najdeš in delo opraviš. Če ste na vodstvenih nivojih, ga opravite, če je strateško, če ne ga delegirate. Hitro, uspešno in učinkovito. Nimamo druge možnosti. 6 priporočil, 6 iztočnic. Take ljudi poskušamo najti v Competu. Jih ni 98% populacije. Jih ni 98%. Torej, kakšni vodje? Vodje, ki bodo uspešni v 21. stoletju, imajo sledeče lastnosti ljudje. In sicer, v bistvu vodja, moderen vodja je coach, trener. Eni so zelo proti, če rečemo, da je coach trener po slovensko, meni je pa na koncu to zelo, zelo ljuba beseda, čeprav se tudi coach zelo prijelo. Torej, jaz sem trener, razumem svoje zaposlene, sem z njimi v stiku. Dejansko je to dobra novica za to, da bomo iz tega individualizma malo bolj pahnjeni v koncept seveda povezovanja, tudi druženja na koncu koncev, ki bo drugačno kot tako, ki ga marsikaterem modernem slovenskem podjetju poznamo danes, pa smo že leta 2016. Ne? Pressing, ne veš, kje se te glava drži, 3 naloge naenkrat, v eni roki mobitel, v drugi roki, ne vem jaz kaj je vaše delovno orodje in direkt proti svetli bodočnosti. Torej, modern vodja se ne ukvarja več s podrobnosti, opolnomoča ljudi, naredi jih vedre, naredi jih strastne. Opolnomočen človek vedno preseneti vodjo, naredi boljše, kot smo mi mislili, da je možno. To je dobra novica. Mentaliteta vodja bo mogla biti drugačna. Si predstavljate dirigenta v enem orkestru, ki bi ga bilo strah, da bi violinist igral boljše kot on violino, ki bi unik igral na triangel boljše zadev takt kot on. Ne, dirigent išče najboljšega violinista, išče najboljšega kontrabasista, najboljšega bobnarja. Zakaj? Zaradi tega, ker on dela nekaj drugega. Najboljša violinistka njemu ni konkurenca. In to je dobra novica za vse vodje, ki tukaj sedite. Vaši sodelavci, ne podrejeni, vaši sodelavci niso vaša konkurenca. So sodelavci. Opolnomočen sodelavec naredi boljše, kot ste se vi kadarkoli zamislili, da je možno. Povežete prvi sklop prvih 3 dejavnik, izražanje iskrene skrbi za počutje podrejenih. Omogoča večjo človeško bližino. Omogoča občutek zavedanja, da so vaši ljudje, pa hkrati tudi vi, nekomu pomembni, da odnos z vami šteje. Si predstavljate kakšno tako, vi ne sedijo tukaj, recimo jaz, ko hodim okrog, pa druga podjetja, ne? Ko pride nekdo v službo, imate reče vodja, bem ti je že z dopusta, še 3 dni bi mu dal od svojega, samo da ga ne gledam. Si predstavljate delati v takem podjetju? Nekaj nepredstavljivega, z muko iti v službo. Stik, toplina, mehkoba. Kdo si? Vem, da imaš 2 otroka, vem, da eden končuje 9. razred osnovne šole. Ti kam se bo vpisal v srednjo šolo? To je jolly za modernega vodjo. Dosegati rezultate, ni druge. Ne glede na to, kako se mi razumemo, ne glede na to, kako smo mi, ni vodji, smo plosko organizirani in tako naprej, brez rezultatov nas ni. Razumete, teh 25 let samostojnosti pozabljenega planskega gospodarstva je vzelo vso romantiko proč. Ni romantike, ljudje. Rabiš rezultat. Sendvič ne nastane samo od sebe. Baje, da je Sai Baba je materializiral, moderni menedžeri ne znajo. Morajo imeti rezultat, morajo imeti prodane stvari. Ne morejo materializirati dobička, ne morejo ga kreirati. Razvoj karier je izjemno pomemben, tukaj je strah, ne? Vedno imamo piramido, smo imeli po starem, če je organizacija razsuta po tleh, če so ščinke po tleh, ki trkajo med sabo, komunicirajo, se združujejo, če dvignemo malo kler juhov, grejo tja, tam se nekaj dvigne, grejo drugam. Torej čisto taka fluidna organizacija, ampak vendarle, nekdo mora imeti oko na temu, da ljudje naredijo razliko med tem, kaj so bili prej in kaj so danes. Si predstavljate, koliko časa vi vsako leto porabite neto časa za razmišljanje in organiziranje dopusta. In je od pol ure do 2 dni stekle noter, sigurno. To večkrat vprašam. Eni rečemo, ne, jaz sem to razmišljam, to vzamo kufro pa gremo. Ne, koliko se štejemo skupaj, ne, pa vključimo še ženino delo, ne, je kar ene par ur. Ne. In zdaj vi razmislite o bistveno bolj pomembnejši stvari v vašem življenju. O tem, zakaj boste leta 2017 na koncu boljši človek, kot ste danes. Koliko časa, minut, ur, kakšne boste rekli sekund, posvečamo natančni kreaciji leta 2016. Kaj bom jaz, Aleksander, počel, da bom leta 2017 boljši človek, ne boljši psiholog, menedžer, boljši človek, drugačen človek. Bližje temu, da bom rekel, da je eno leto, ki je bilo narejeno, da smo imeli te projekte, imeli te, kaj pa vem, stranke, da smo to zaslužili in zakaj sem jaz drugačen. In ko bom jaz to znal ponotraniti, bom razumel, kako pomembno je načrtovati kariere svojih sodelavcev. Modern vodja brez vizije in strategije ga ne bo. Ga ne bo. Imeti jasno podobo, kam gremo. Tudi poslanstvo, zakaj smo tukaj, je pomembno. A kam gremo? Zakaj gremo tja? Tukaj zadaj se skriva smisel. Smisel življenja. Ljudje so sposobni narediti izjemno zahtevne stvari, nepredstavljivo zahtevne stvari. Iti kot žveplo in ogenj, če v tem vidijo smisel. Če ne vidijo smisla, bo zlata kletka zgolj in samo zlata kletka. Kletka. Tudi če je zlata. In pa ne pozabiti tehnično znanje. Ne gre več za to, da ima kakšna generacija, pa tukaj mislim bolj na svojo, ne, možnost reči, veš kaj, mene Facebook ne zanima. To je mimo, to ne deluje. Na srečo sem jaz že toliko star, da tega ne rabim več. Moderne tehnološke rešitve mi bojo pomagale biti živ, prisoten, povezan, večdimenzionalen. V vseh aspektih, ki jih psihologija danes razume, večdimenzionalen, v čisto čustvenem in osebnostnem smislu. Po eni strani se jaz tega obdobja dejansko veselim. Načeloma, večina nas, če bo šlo vse po sreči, brez kakšnih presenečenj, bomo leta 2030 klenikje. Se res tega obdobja veselim. Bomo pa po poti morali biti pozorni, da ne bomo postali rastline nasproti pametnim telefonom in pametnim igračkam. Da bomo hranili sebstvo, svoj jaz. Niti ne ego, jaz. Torej, če zdaj nekoliko strnemo v tem zadnjem našem delu, edino orodje, ki ga danes ljudje imamo za učinkovito zadovoljevanje potreb, doseganje ciljev, uresničevanje interesov, je kaj? Delo, vedenje, obnašanje. Jaz dostikrat vpravim tudi trening. Ne všeč reči trening. Kam greš na trening? Zakaj? Bom boljši potem. Grem delati, bom naredil, se vležem pa konc. Trening je meni lepa beseda. Grem trenirati. Torej, v osnovi seveda našega vedenja pa leži kaj? Naši potencijali. Sam pa ste zdaj, mi vsi imamo potencijale, je res? Eni bolj vemo, eni manj kakšni so. Sam naše potencijale, kaj lahko mi z njimi naredimo? Lahko jih izkoristimo, lahko jih uresničimo, lahko jih razvijemo, lahko jih pa zapravimo. Ja, če bi jaz 15 let nazaj se odločil zaigrati kitaro, mater, kakšen kitarist bi bil danes. Če bi midva ženo začela vaditi tango pred 10 leti, veš, ko je bilo danes lepo, bi šla lahko na eno in bi pol midva to plesala. Noben čas ni izgubljen. Izgubljen je samo tisti, v katerem se vi odločite, da nekaj ali nečesa ne boste naredili. Živeti v samoobteževanju, da nekaterih potencialov nismo izkoristili, zaradi tega, ker ni bilo priložnosti, je pomilovanje svoje usode, smiljenje samemu sebi. Deluje samo pri eni stvari. Samo pri eni stvari. Človek se grozljivo počuti, ma pomaga pri eni stvari. Nisi za to odgovoren. Ker je bilo to že 15 let nazaj, takrat ni bilo sreče in ne, kaj ćemo zdaj. Torej vsak, ki čuti odgovornost, je njegov trenutek zdaj. Ravno pravi. Ne tečemo več tako hitro, kot smo pred 20 leti, ne dvignemo več tako težko, ne skočimo tako visoko, lahko uporabljamo naše možgane, je res? Če imamo 15 let izkušenj, lahko naredimo stvari drugače. Torej, učenje življenja lahko poteka zgolj in samo na podlagi izkušenj. Danes okrog nas je ogromno teoretikov življenja. Razumete, otroci, kljub temu, da so, kaj so rekli, generacije, kako se oni rodijo? Ko jih date tam na mizo, ko so stari en teden, pa ni mame, pa so lačni, pa poluljeni, a čakajo? Ali če jaz se me ljubi, se bo prišla? Ali se derejo? Se derejo, vzamejo stvari v svoje roke. Hočejo servis, ga zahtevajo in ga dobijo. Pri 3 letih, še vedno ta čuden YZ, indigo otrok, kaj vpije v kuhinji? Dej ti, mama, ali puti, jaz sam. Razumete, otroci se rodijo normalni. Nič narobe. Sem pol, ko on hoče v kuhinji delati, sodelovati, dokle biti noter v stvareh. Ma ne zdaj, pejdi tam in se gre digitalizirati. Ker ven ne sme iti, ker je nevarno, ker ulica je nevarno, smo rekli 25 let nazaj. Otroke treba z ulice not poslati, sam je benti časa, da bi se mi z njimi ukvarjali, pa nimamo. Ga damo za 1 uro, 2 na krožek, pol gre na angleščino, pol gre na fuzbal, pol vsemo, presli pride domov, je bentiš. Kaj zdaj? In poziti damo ta pod nogami in hoče delati in ne veš, kaj z njimi narediti in pedi. In pol en dan nam verjame, on gre ven iz kuhinje, gre. In potem se neko starši reče v osnovi, pa sam internet gre, pa kdo ga je to naučil? Pa ta šola, pa si bi lahko kaj pametnega naučili. Zdaj, mi smo ga naredili takega. Ma na srečo, kot vidimo, kam grejo trendi, se digitalizira. Obvlada moderne tehnologije. Torej, spet je nekaj dobrega v tem. Otroci, sodelavci, zdaj sem malo o otroci, tako ki mi je simpatično malo reči o kakšnih, ne? Torej, ne bojo se ljudje učili na podlagi naših izkušenj. Svoje morajo dobiti. Morajo postati praktiki življenja ljudje. Si predstavljate? Po mojem mnenju, midva z Goranom Dragićem enako preigravava. Vam povem, nakažeš, da greš v levo, v resnici greš v desno. Vodiš, da ne narediš korakov, ko se ti znajde 2,5 metra velik človek pred tabo, hitro švihneš levo mimo njega, da se ne bi žogo zaletel v njega in daš za ramo naprej, greš v dvokorak in ne na prvih obroč, ker te on čaka z banano, na drugi obroč se obrneš in daš koš. Ista stvar. Samo jaz niti trojk več ne igram. On igra v Miamiju. Jaz sem teoretik preigravanja ljudje. On je praktik. In jutri bomo rabili praktike življenja, ki bodo sposobni svojo strastjo, ki bo tako kot elektrika. Razumete, a vaše podjetje so elektrificirana? Imajo elektriko, imajo IT, imate IT v vaših podjetjih. Razumete, to ni več konkurenčna prednost, to ni commodity, strast, serijsko, predanost, serijsko. Kaj bo ta razlika? Sposobnost oddati rezultat, narediti, doseči cilj. In seveda, kako ustvariti te praktike? Kakšne vrline naj imajo ti ljudje? Zdaj, da ne bi pretiravali, o dveh smo že govorili na naših srečanjih in optimizmu vi že vse veste, je res? O čustveni inteligenci prav tako. Danes, da ne gremo čist brez nič domov, o mestu nadzora. Ste slišali kdaj o mestu nadzora? Locus kontrole. Seveda moji kolegi vejo, o čem je govora. Če ste normalen človek, ne veste še, o čem je govora. Torej, optimizem je zelo preprosta zadeva, da osvežimo. Sem mislil, da vas bom izprašal, pa so rekli, ne, Aleksander, daj ti povej, pa da gremo hitro naprej. Torej, optimizem je običajno človeško pričakovanje ali naravnanost, da se bojo zgodile dobre stvari. To ne pomeni, upam, da bom naredil izpit, pa se učiti. Naravnanost je to, grem se učiti in ker sem se učil, je velika verjetnost, da bom naredil izpit. Je res? Pesimizem je seveda precenjevanje stvari, ki naj bi šle narobe. Brez veze, da se grem učiti, tako ne bom naredil izpita. To je res pesimizem. Torej, način, kako razmišljamo, je dejansko povezan s tem, ne samo kam bomo šli, ma tudi to, ali bomo tja prišli. Moderne neurokognitivne teorije kažejo pomembnost načina razmišljanja. Ko bom razlagal locus kontrole, še nekaj več o tem. Kar se tiče čustvene inteligence, zelo preprosto, to je posameznikova sposobnost, da ostale svoje potenciale, ki jih ima, lahko v praksi dejansko udejanji, da jih živi, da jih realizira. Dobra novica je, da čustveno inteligenco z izkušnjami, z delom na sebi lahko dvignemo. In na koncu imamo zdaj mesto nadzora, ali kot smo temu rekli, locus kontrole, je bolj lepše pravilno slovensko, če rečemo mesto nadzora. Zakaj mislite, da ste uspešni? Zakaj mislite, da ste danes prišli sem? Ali mislite, da je to vaša odločitev, ali ste vi na avtopilotu? Ali moramo, ali hočemo, je neverjetno velika razlika. Dan današnji, približno tretjina zaposlenih ljudi na drugi strani oceana živi v eni od, z našimi besedami rekli, prekarnih oblik zaposlitve. V Sloveniji izgleda, kot da smo to zdaj ugotovili, se zbudili, nekdo je luč užgal, mater, ni več stalnih zaposlitev. Ja, ljudje, ni več dogovorne ekonomije. Ne vemo, koliko ljudi bomo rabili v roku 1 leta, 2 let, 3 letih, mogoče ne niti čez 3 tedne. Ene stvari lahko predvidimo. In ta striženje teh sil, iskanja varnosti, razvijanje toplih medčloveških odnosov in po drugi strani kruta tržna naravnanost. Tukaj je po moje prihodnost naše konkurenčnosti. Če bomo mi znali te dve na videz nasprotujoči si sili upravljati učinkovito, da ljudje ne bodo mislili, da si jih želimo, da jih ljubimo samo takrat, ko jih rabimo in da tisti trenutek, ko poslovno postanejo strošek, jih šutiramo čez vrata. Ko bomo imeli občutek, da se jih res razveselimo in da bomo vse naredili za to, da bomo dolgo skupaj, kolikor se bo dalo, niti minute več. In se med tem z njimi oblašali kot z ljudmi, bomo mogoče, bom rekel, ta spin prihodnosti dodali tak, v katerem se bomo tudi v prihodnosti veliko smejali, veliko objemali in seveda uživali. Fokus in osredotočenost je na to, ne kdo mi smo, kaj imamo, vir. Koliko časa imate na razpolago, ki ga posvetite stvarem, ki so vaša strast? Koliko iznajdljivosti, koliko poguma, kakšne komunikacijske spretnosti imate. Razumete, časi, vsi to že veste, časi, v kateri smo v življenje pisali, pa sem visok, pa simpatičen, pa lahko delam sam, lahko delam tudi v timu. Zanima me kreativno okolje, ma ne bo nič hudega, če delam tudi rutinsko delo. Vse sem, je res. To je pa vse, kakšen rezultat lahko dosežeš. Delal sem v podjetju, v katerem je bilo na področju prodaje približno 2 milijona evrov prometa, jaz sem prišel tja, zaposlili smo 5 ljudi, naredili nove procese, izboljšali produkte in danes prodajamo 12 milijonov robe. Koliko časa je minilo takrat? 3 leta. Wow, takega rabimo, ga zaposlimo jutri do malce. Kaj znaš narediti, ne kdo si? Zelo, zelo pomembno. Torej, kako upravljaš čas, energijo in vse vire, seveda, s katerimi razpolagaš. Torej, temeljno vprašanje je, kako narediti ljudi, ki bodo imeli mesto nadzora v sebi, ki bodo dejansko verjeli, da se stvari dogajajo zaradi tega, ker oni počnejo drugače stvari, ker jih hote počnejo. Jaz smo imeli srečo, je bila prijazna stranka, res so bili dobre volje danes. Jutri ne gremo, zakaj? Tanja Cenger je rekla, da vremensko občutljivi ljudje ne bodo imeli, bodo imeli z vremenom povezane težave, boljš, da ne gremo. Itak bojo vsi nervozni tam. Razumete, ko vi začnete upravljati svoje vire na tako učinkovito, da se dejansko začnejo dogajati stvari v smer, ki ste jo predvideli. To bo jutrišnji človek, ki dejansko bo motiviran za to, da se bo potem drugače počutil. Zakaj ljudje niso motivirani? Ker ne verjamejo, da se bojo boljše počutili. Zakaj se ljudje bojijo sprememb? Ker mislijo, da se bojo slabše počutili. Ja si predstavljate direktorji, ki sedite tukaj, da bi se ljudje bali spremembe, če bi rekli, od januarja naprej damo 200 evrov višje plače. Kaj pa taka sprememba? Navdušeni bojo na tako spremembo. Sprememba je nevarna in se je ne želimo sam takrat, ko se jo bojimo. Ko nas je strah, da bomo v novih razmerah težje zadovoljevali svoje potrebe, dosegali cilje, uresničevali interese. Takrat se bojimo spremembe. Torej, temeljno vprašanje današnjega dne, od začetka, vam pazite zdaj, ne? Zakaj hodite v službo, ljudje? Ker hočete ali ker morate? Zakaj opravljate delovne naloge? Ker hočete ali ker morate? Obstaja še tretje vprašanje. Zakaj ste še vedno z enim in istim partnerjem? Kaj pa čem? Si predstavljate, da danes pridete domov taki napaljeni od tega, kar so Competovci naredili, kar smo ustvarili skupaj. Ne, in reči, ti draga, zakaj si še z mano? Ja, sej tak je. Kdo bi me pa še hotel zdaj, po vseh teh letih? Zmirno amortiziranega. Za dober denar, se vse zmenimo. Razumete, a hočeš, ne? In reči, pridi sem, da ti jaz pokažem, zakaj sem s tabo. To si vsi želimo, je res? In si predstavljaš, da rečeš v službo, ker moraš. Kaj bi pa pol počel? Ja, kaj drugega, kaj pa niti ne vem. Ne biti modern zaposleni. Mislim, smo še malo, pa bo leto 2030. Prej, ko si mislimo. Torej, ker moramo ali ker hočemo. Človek, ki se zaveda svoje odgovornosti do tega, kako se želi počutiti, v kakšnem dnevu hoče živeti, kakšen dan si hoče narediti, kakšen tim si hoče narediti, se zaveda, da je mesto nadzora njegovih izbir in njegovih odločitev tukaj nekje noter. Ma bodite pozorni, kam kažem. Ne tle, ljudje. To je veljalo od Descartesa naprej, cogito ergo sum, zafrknuje 300 let razvoja. Mislim torej sem. In seveda moderna evropska svetovna, zahodna civilizacija nažiga na ta racijo, nažiga na kognitivno, nažiga na to, kaj je prav, kaj je boljše, kaj je več, kaj je manj. Sem prepričan, da se mesto nadzora počasi premika sem dol. In vse, kar sem jaz danes slišal od kolega Perija, je bilo to. Mesto nadzora se pomika sem noter. Moderne organizacije bo imele liderje, ki jim bo srce bilo 100 na uro za ljudi, za ideje, za prihodnost, za nekaj dobrega. In del te prihodnosti verjamem, da smo lahko tudi mi, vsi skupaj, da jo kreiramo, da jo ustvarimo, da jo naredimo. Dajmo si povedati, kaj delamo dobro, dajmo si povedati, kaj je v redu. Modern slovenski šef, pa daj mi to, kdo je to naredil, kdo je za J in take stvari. Hvala, ker ste naredili, to popravite, naredite boljše. Naredite boljše, se da narediti boljše. Mi lahko naredimo boljše, vsi skupaj. Vodenje je doseganje ciljev s pomočjo drugih ljudi. Če bi lahko naredili sami, ne bi rabili drugih ljudi, je res? Torej, če je vodenje doseganje ciljev s pomočjo drugih ljudi, v kakšnih odnosih naj bomo z njimi ljudje? Samo ena možnost je, v dobrih odnosih. In nimamo druge priložnosti ljudje, kot da si prihodnost kreiramo in ustvarimo sami. Mi na Competu delamo na tem. Hvala lepa. Kje ste zdaj?
Takoj pridemo, Aleksander, bomo dali še možnost, da ker strastni govorci zmeri strastne spraševalce zbudijo.
Ja, tako.
Damo še tri vprašanja. 3 zato, ker na Competu smo navajeni, da pripeljemo stvari do konca, tako da bomo tudi naš dogodek. Tako da 3 vprašanja, kratka, strnjena. Zaključimo ta projekt današnjega dogodka in potem bojo Aleksander, Peri in pa Petra na voljo tudi za vsa vaša vprašanja.
Jasna, tam dol.
140 znakov.
Aleksander, vprašanje. Poznamo eno raziskavo, ki so jo delali na Fakulteti za družbene vede, ki govori o zelo visokem deležu nezadovoljnih in utrujenih slovenskih zaposlenih. Zakaj imamo Slovenci tako težavo, da zamenjamo službo? Ker to hočemo ali ker to želimo ostati v trpečih odnosih?
Jaz mislim, hvala za to vprašanje. Hvala. Jaz mislim, da imamo, niti slučajno, da imamo mi nefleksibilen trg dela. Mi smo klenoter nefleksibilni. Mi smo naučeno nemočni. Mi živimo v kulturi, v kateri dejansko res si dajemo napačne povratne informacije. Mi res verjamemo, da je težko. Mi res verjamemo, da je hudo. To je pravilna ugotovitev. Ljudje so aktivno celo nezainteresirani v okoljih. Zato jaz rečem, da se mogoče malo, pa jaz sem optimist, ne, se me poznate, ampak vendarle ne, o prihodnosti, ki govorimo, je prihodnost 2-3% ljudi. 98% ljudi je jeznih, je nakurjenih, je razočaranih, je prestrašenih. Pišejo komentarje anonimne na blogih. Dajo ven take stvari sebe, da se jaz kot psiholog čudim, da je nekaj takega možno iz ljudi ven dobiti. Tisto, kar jaz verjamem, kar je pisalo 2 slajda nazaj. Začnimo verjeti v to, da dajanje dobrih, pozitivnih informacij dejansko res spremeni samopodobo, samozavest, občutek lastne vrednosti. Samo ljudje, ki dosežejo rezultat, pri katerih nekdo opazi, kaj so dosegli, jim da pozitivno povratno informacijo, lahko aktivno vzamejo usodo in s tem življenje v svoje roke. Drugače ni možno. Ta raziskava govori o slovenskem vodenju in o slovenskem kulturi in karakterju. Hvala.
Jaz imam pa vprašanje vezano na locus kontrole kot psihologinja. Po tvojem mnenju, kaj so tiste stvari, s katerimi lahko pri sodelavcih ali pa konec koncev tudi pri malih nejcih, ki niso Messi in Ronaldinho, spodbujamo notranji locus kontrole oziroma pač to odgovornost za nekaj, kar se jim dogaja?
Bom začel najprej pri otrocih, pa pol pri odraslih, ker bomo samo spremenili terminologijo. Ne? V bistvu modern starš je obseden z tega, da je otrok njegov projekt. Obseden je od tega, da bo optimalno funkcioniral. Dobesedno tako, optimalno deloval. To pomeni, mora znati tu jezik, mora znati en inštrument, mora biti vpet, ne vem v kakšne aktivnosti, zaradi tega, da slučajno mu ne bi, bom rekel, že v štartu odvzeli enega koraka prednosti pred vsemi ostalimi. In seveda, dokler se otrok uči, tako kot se on navajen učiti, kako gre on se učiti rolati? Se gremo učiti rolati, gremo risati, gremo smučati, gremo plavati. In potem se vključi recimo ata. In ata pride, punčka pride, reče, lej, ati, kaj sem narisala. Reče, super, ma zakaj si šla čez črto? Ti že znaš risati do črte. Pa bom jaz plačeval 20 € na mesec za tvoj krožek, pa boš ti risala čez črto. Ajde, da ti to do črte. In on misli, da vzpodbuja. Otroka tisti trenutek, 2-krat to ponovimo, neha zanimati risanje. Ljudje zlagajo trgovske police. Zlagajo, v nulo jih zlagajo. Zjutraj pride šef v službo, gre tako. Kaj so te flaše obrnjene tako? Kdo je to delal? On ni rekel, Kdo je vse te police zložil skupaj? Mi. Pa kdaj ste prišli v službo, ljudje, da je vse to tako zloženo? Pa smo prišli 1 uro prej. Mega. Zdaj pa sam ti, Jožica, pej tja pa une flaše, same etikete narobe obrni in pol je taka trgovina, jo odpremo čez 5 minut. Logika, drugačen feedback. In ljudje bodo šli in rekli, je opazil, da smo zložili 150 metrov polic. To. Z veseljem une obrnemo narobe, res je nekdo to pozabil. To je razlika v poslu, ki bo lokus kontrole premaknila sem. Dobro se imamo zaradi sebe, ne ker je šef dobre volje. Ker imamo srečo, da danes ni nakurjen. Hvala, Katja.
Še eno?
To je to.
To je to.
Hvala lepa še enkrat. Hvala lepa vsem. Halo. To je Competo, nov, modern Competo. Mi se razumemo, mi si zaupamo in mi delamo skupaj. In vedno je nekdo nad nami.
To smo mi, predani k temu, da gradimo boljšo prihodnost skupaj z vami. Hvala, ker nam zaupate vseh 6 let in še enkrat najlepša hvala vsem našim pokroviteljem, partnerjem, kandidatom in seveda novim prijateljem.
Hvala lepa.
Jaz pa preden se mogoče res čisto zares še poslujemo, da imam vendarle vsej ta zadnjo besedo, bi se rad zahvalil eni osebi, brez katere pa v bistvu tega dogodka danes niti ne bilo. Pa mogoče ne sem danes, ampak vseh prejšnjih tudi. Laura, hvala.
Hvala.
Vam vsem skupaj pa želim en fantastičen, čudovit, sončen dan, prijeten, vesel december, lepe praznike, pa verjamem, da se vidimo konec leta 2017 tudi. Hvala lepa in nasvidenje.
Srečno.